And we have the session moderator, Mr. Sunil Padale, National Coordinator, Biodiversity Finance and Sustainable Land Management, UNDP India. Please give a big round of applause. We are also joined by Dr. Nandita Mishra, Professor in Accounting and Integrated Reporting, Linköping University, Sweden, Ambassador, International Integrated Reporting Council, IIRC, London. Welcome, Nandita. We welcome you virtually to the conference, to the panel discussion on sustainability reporting.
Thank you.
Before I introduce the guest, I would like Dr. Bhavna and Dr. Pallavi to felicitate the guest with our token of love and appreciation. Students, can you just bring the... First, we welcome Ms. Shireen Khujur, Head CHES and CSR Azure Par. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for sharing your time. Please welcome Dr. Vikas Goswami, Head of Consulting, Boundless Environment Resource Solutions. Please put your hands together loudly, everybody. We are delighted to welcome Mr. Narayan Vaidyanathan, Head of Policy Development, ACCA. Please bring it quickly, Sania. Mr. Narayan. Once again, welcome Mr. Narayan. We are extremely thankful for Mr. Labanya Prakash Jina, Head Center for Sustainable Finance, Climate Policy Initiative, New Delhi, to join us for this panel discussion on sustainability reporting and biodiversity finance. We also welcome the person behind this particular show, this particular session, the session moderator, Mr. Sunil Padale, National Coordinator, Biodiversity Finance and Sustainable Land Management, UNDP, India. And we virtually give our greetings to Dr. Nandita Mishra, who has joined us online. Give a big round of applause. Before we start the session, just let me give a small introduction to our panelist. Ms. Shireen Khujur is a seasoned sustainability professional with a strong background in ESG, with particular emphasis on sustainability disclosures and ratings, strategy formulation, stakeholder management, and target achievement. She has experience of working in different industries, including renewable energy and fast-moving consumer goods. Prior to Azure Par, she was part of sustainability team in Renew, overseeing and implementing company's sustainable initiatives. She formerly worked at Hindustan Coca-Cola Beverages Private Limited, where she was instrumental in developing the company's social development strategy. She oversaw several community development programs built in collaborations with key parties. She has also performed social due diligence on prospective greenfield projects to ensure they met the company's social and environmental goals. She is a master's degree in development planning and administration from University of London, and holds a postgraduate diploma in forestry management from Indian Institute of Forest Management and his graduate arts degree from University of Delhi. Once again, we welcome Ms. Sharon to the panel discussion. Next, we have Dr. Vikas Goswami. She has worked in the development sector for 26 years, of which the last 22 have been in sustainability and corporate social responsibility. Her focus is primarily on stakeholder engagement, management, strategic engagement with internal stakeholders, transformation strategies, into input into program design, resourcing, resource management, policy engagement, and policy advocacy. She is head of consulting at Boundless Environment Resource Solutions Private Limited, and which is one of the Asia's top sustainability superwoman in 2019. Please give a big round of applause. Dr. Vikas is passionate about the nature-based solutions, circularity, green economy, and jobs. We welcome you here, ma'am. I'm just making it a little brief. Mr. Narayanan is Head of Policy Development as Association of Chartered Certified Accountant, a globally recognized professional accountancy body providing qualification and advancing standards in accountancy worldwide. He is collaborating on behalf of ACCA with the current Lord Mayor of the City of London, International Ambassador for the UK financial and professional service sector on various aspects, including an ethical AI certificate. Additionally, he has collaborated with technology-focused education providers as well as regulators for like the International Ethical Standard Board of Accountancy, New York. Welcome, Narayanan, to the session. We have Mr. Lavanya Prakash Jina. He's working as Head of Center for Sustainable Finance Program in Climate Policy Initiative in India. Lavanya has rich and diverse experiences over 18 years in financial services, non-profit institutions, technical assistance in international development and academia. Before returning to CPI, he worked as Regional Climate Finance Advisor at Commonwealth Secretariat. In his earlier stint at CPI, he worked as a Manager Climate Finance for over 5 years. Thank you, Lavanya, for joining us. Thank you so much. And the moderator for the session, Mr. Sunil Padale, is currently working as National Coordinator, Biodiversity Finance, Sustainable Land Management, UNDP. He works on biodiversity conservation, ecological restoration, and natural resource management and UNDP. He leads work on biodiversity finance at UNDP, including engaging policy program development with private and public sector for increased financing for nature. And lastly, we have Dr. Nandita Mishra as the moderator who has joined online. She is professor in accounting and integrated reporting, Linköping University, Sweden. She is ambassador, International Integrated Reporting Council, IIRC London School. Dr. Nandita is part of the Sustainability Reporting Board of ICAI and works closely with Big Four in the field of sustainability and reporting. Nandita Mishra is the cost and management accounting and holds PhD in the field of corporate governance in the banking sector and has more than 20 years of experience in corporate and academics. Welcome once again, Ms. Nandita Mishra. Now it's over to Sunil Padale, the moderator for this session, to take it further. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ponita. At the onset, I am extremely thankful to Amity University for having organized this workshop, this session. I'm also very thankful to each of the panel members. I think we have an extremely distinguished panel today. And as a moderator, I'm very fortunate. It's very rare to have a panel which strongly represents each aspect of the subject that is at hand to discuss. So we really look forward to inputs from each one of us. Also welcome to Dr. Nandita. She's on the screen over there. And finally, thanks to all of you for having come. We really look forward to a very interactive session where we also look forward to learning from all of you. Friends, it's as a moderator, it's always fortunate to be handling the first session after the inaugural plenary, because much of the context has been set so you don't really need to talk too much. But especially on biodiversity, there are a few points I would like to certainly flag as we start the discussion. In the morning, in the inaugural plenary, I think all the speakers spoke about the relationship between business and natural resources, biodiversity also being an important component. But where it really kind of becomes important from the finance perspective is really in terms of financing. Biodiversity has been all around us. In fact, we've all grown up with different elements of biodiversity along with us. It's a very important component of economic growth. In fact, the World Economic Forum, in its global risk report this year, flagged biodiversity loss as one of the 5 major threats to economic growth. Further, in the morning, we also heard Ashish ji and others speaking also about how more than 50% of global GDP, which is around USD 44 trillion, actually depends on biodiversity in different forms. So it's a very important aspect, very often overlooked, somewhere in the corner in the larger debate or discussion around climate change. It's not a subject which is very visible. In India, more than 75% of the population depends on natural resources, especially linked to biodiversity in some form or the other, either through agriculture, through forestry-based livelihoods, or through dependence on marine or aquatic resources like fish, for example. The humble BD, all of us have seen people smoking BD. BD depends on forests for its leaves. The Tendupata leaf is one of the important contributors to the manufacturing sector employment. Very interestingly, around 7% of the total employment generated through the manufacturing sector just comes from the Tendupata, the BD industry. So it's huge. Honey, India is one of the largest consumers and one of the largest exporters of honey. Much of it coming from forest resources. Again, medicinal plants, the Ayurvedic industry, which is more than 60,000 crores now, and again, one of the largest export kind of industries in the country, also depends significantly on biodiversity resources. But over the years, due to urbanization, infrastructure development, mining also, we heard about it in the morning, and also because of unsustainable use of these resources, there's a rapid decline in these resources, which needs sufficient attention. Attention not just in terms of policy, but also in terms of financing. And I think that's where we are really kind of going to focus on in the discussion today. Public sector financing, government financing through its various programs like Namami Gange, Green India Mission, the National Tiger Conservation, etc., have been the mainstay of funding for biodiversity conservation. But increasingly, there is now pressure on the private sector, especially considering that 60 to 70% of the GDP globally is from the private sector. But in terms of the private sector contribution to biodiversity conservation, it's less than 5%. So there are now a lot of questions and a lot of pressure on private sector through different means. And private sector, of course, we'll also kind of hear our panel members talk about it. There is CSR, there is philanthropy, also green processes within private sector production. Also, of course, new climate or biodiversity financing mechanisms, which we will hear about today, are coming up. The challenge is how do we bring these together, because biodiversity projects or biodiversity programming requires long-term attention, requires long-term financing, and relatively financing products have a shorter term kind of duration of interest. So friends, we would also kind of be focusing on some of these issues. The way we have structured the discussion is that we'll have one round of discussion, one round of questions with each of the panel members. And then we'll have a second round of questions. There is also a short discussion which Dr. Punita Goyal will be doing, especially on some of the work which Amity University has been doing on sustainability reporting. At this point, I would now request my co-moderator, Dr. Nandita, if she would like to make some opening remarks.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot. And thanks for inviting to such an exciting and interesting session on this topic, which does not just talk about sustainability reporting, but as my co-moderator said it very correctly, about biodiversity finance. And also, it's a great opportunity to listen and discuss this topic with esteemed guests for this session. So I would like to welcome all our guests. And as I said, it's a great opportunity to moderate and also listen to all of you. This topic is very close to my heart. It is one of the research area which I really enjoy doing. And of course, it's not just sustainability reporting, as I said, it has a lot to do with the green financing or biodiversity financing, and I'm looking forward to listen to all our esteemed guests. Given that the social and environmental risk and opportunity have a strong potential to impact the long-term security and success of the country or company, it is essential that companies dedicate both time and resources towards sustainable solution. And I think that sustainability reporting serves as a strategic cornerstone, which basically enables all organization to work towards this emerging challenge. But most of the time, it has been observed not just through research, but even here in EU, the challenge which we observe why companies are not reporting or working towards sustainability is lack of funding. And sometimes I think it's but still many companies struggle to work, as I said, on sustainable goals and sustainability due to lack of funding and investors. And I think green financing or biodiversity financing can be a solution to this challenge. So basically, embedding biodiversity issue into the strategic business and financial actors is critical to integrate biodiversity in private sector, especially. And we must prioritize integrating biodiversity in the overall corporate strategy. We should align corporate target and goals with corporate strategy and management standards, and basically integrate biodiversity across investment strategy. So, as I said, I'm looking forward to listen more to our guest and know more about initiatives in India. I have been working here in Sweden and also in Europe, and I know that especially after the new EU directive, there is a lot of emphasis around biodiversity finance, and especially connecting the sustainability reporting to biodiversity finance is the basically need of the hour. So looking forward for the session, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to moderate this session. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Nandita. We'll now get into the first round of questions, and we'll start with Dr. Vikas Goswami. Dr. Goswami, like was shared by Dr. Ponita, is a veteran of the sustainability sector in India. She has led large corporate groups on sustainability. She's also been a part of various policy level discussions and processes around sustainability, especially for the private sector. So, Dr. Vikas Goswami, request if you could share your experience on how, or maybe also how not, biodiversity challenges have been addressed in national policies. We also request if you could share some of the recent work that you have been engaged in. You've been advising UNDP, you've been advising quite a few other institutions also on strengthening these policies, especially from the perspective of biodiversity conservation.
Thanks, Sunil. Thanks, Dr. Nandita, and my eminent panelists. What I find is that about 10 years ago, when we started drafting the first national voluntary guidelines on responsible business, which was subsequently incorporated as BRR by the SEBI. Then we revised it again for national responsible guidelines, where the voluntary word was dropped and the BRSR came into place. And if you look at the CSR law as well, they're extensive on the Schedule 7 as to what all can be incorporated. And if one looks at the spending now, especially the national responsible guidelines are for whatever happens within the organization. CSR is basically about whatever happens outside the boundary gates of the organization. So if I look at biodiversity from both these perspectives, what happens inside and what happens outside. On the outside, what we have found is that when I was doing the stakeholder engagement for UNDP, I found that, and if you do research, you will yourself be able to see that only about 3 to 5% of the CSR funds that are available in the country are spent on environment issues. And that environment issues include things like Namami Gange, include issues like total sanitation program of the government of India, Swachh Bharat program, and will include a lot of afforestation programs, but not specifically on biodiversity. So biodiversity is not specifically called out. Rather, large umbrella statements on environment and on Namami Gange have been given. That's the side of the CSR story. Now let's look at what is happening inside and let's look at biodiversity. Though biodiversity impacts 60 to 70% of the business of various organizations, the direct linkage of where you're procuring your raw material from and the impact that biodiversity would have on your work has not been established. And where it has been established, companies would rather have a uniform product line. And I'll not name organizations here. When you're looking at potatoes and potato chips, especially your finger chips, you want a potato of a particular kind, size, shape, and variety. And farmers then grow that kind of a potato only at the cost of reducing demand, seeding of other kinds of varieties of potatoes. And we are progressively losing those varieties of potatoes. Similarly, for rice itself, there may be 1,000, 3,000 varieties of rice in our country, but demand for basmati or demand for particular kinds of rice is reducing the demands for other kinds of rice. This year was the millets year. So suddenly millets came into fore. Now millets are also, we're talking only jawar and bajra. While there are actually more than 50 kinds of millets grown in India. We are not even talking about it. So the commercial aspects come into being, where a farmer who is growing that kind of a millet, how is the connection made to the person who is going to buy it? So market linkages are very important. Another thing added to that is the cultural context. My basic PhD is in anthropology. So my first question to any problem is where it has to be human centric. If you look at the cultural context, the more upward mobility you have on the financial scale, the lesser amount of jawar and bajra you would consume, and you would move towards rice and wheat, because it was the cultural and social mobility that encouraged those kind of refined kind of grains or cereals to be eaten. So there are lots of different systems into play, which kind of create a demand or not a demand for a particular product which may have a biodiversity footprint. I'm so sure Sunil will ask more about these questions on the financing side later. So I'll leave you with this thought. When something comes to your table, and many, many years ago, Sainsbury, a UK-based, a food chain, had put in an advertising campaign which said, please buy this apple even though it does not look perfect. Because on our pursuit of a perfect apple, the perfect red, the perfect shape, the ill-formed apple, the ill-colored apple is losing out, and that's the biodiversity. So when you go to the market, you're looking for a perfect apple, but the apple which is misshaped, which may not have, like so many times now, I'm astounded to see all apples taste sweet. All bananas taste sweet. When I was growing up, not all apples or all bananas tasted sweet. The variety of the species is being lost, and the consumer has to demand it, and the consumers do have a role to it. The market will take care of it when the consumers start demanding for it. Today, a bajra or a jawar is available, or millets or cereals are available at your local kirana store because the consumer is asking for it.
Thanks, Dr. Goswami, and especially on the point on agrobiodiversity. You'll find it very interesting to know that hardly 50 years ago, India had more than 1,10,000 varieties of rice. There was a variety of rice for any context. If additional heavy rain fell, there was one variety. If waterlogging happened, there was a variety. If no rain fell, there was a variety. There was a variety for sloping land. There was a variety for deserts. There was a variety for coastal lands. But as of now, this is reduced significantly to just 6,000 varieties. But interestingly, India has the second largest gene bank for agriculture in the world. So I think that's something very significant. We'll now move on to Ms. Shireen Kujur. She's again, I mean, we've been talking about the private sector. I think she is really the one who represents the private sector in a way over here. She heads sustainability, environment, health, and CSR at Azure Power and Energy Corporate. Shireen, from the perspective of a corporate leader, what do you perceive as possible motivations for corporate action around biodiversity conservation? And how comfortable are corporates today with planning, monitoring, and also reporting action around biodiversity conservation? Also, some of the challenges, if you could share, that corporates face from this perspective. We sitting outside think that it's something that you all should do. But what is your perspective on this?
Yeah, thank you, Sunil, and thank you to the organizers for inviting me here. So, just to answer the list of questions which my moderator has put forward, what do corporates think when it comes to biodiversity? See, let's be very clear. A lot of you will be aspiring to join one or the other corporates. And what do corporates operate for? Profit. So, for a company who's earning profit, the motive is to earn profit. Biodiversity conservation or management will only come on the drawing board or the board meeting till the point it doesn't impact the business, doesn't become a risk for the business. Until that time, if it does not impact the sustenance of the business, it's not going to come in the drawing board. So, from a corporate perspective, people also sitting on the other side of the table need to understand why a corporate would want to invest in biodiversity. Because that company feels that it's going to be an impediment for its sustainable long time sustenance. Its operations are getting shut down because of biodiversity. Can be due to wildlife movement, can be due to forest fire, can be migratory birds or land degradation. So there are plethora of events and reasons. So till the company does not recognize this, they are not going to talk about biodiversity. And as a person who is responsible for conducting environmental social due diligence, my job is to also orient the management that if you're putting up a plant, these are the environmental risk. And environmental risk does not mean water or waste. Environmental risk also means that the biodiversity is going to impact it. And what drives that? The biggest driver for a corporate is who controls the purse. It is the financiers. And if the financing institution is very, very pushy on taking up biodiversity as part of your management strategy, I can vouch on that the company will go back to the drawing board and integrate it into the strategy. But conservation may not be the right word. They would look at measures as to how they're going to mitigate that risk. Conservation is not the right word for a corporate. They will look, if it is a risk, they will look at the mitigation measures. And that mitigation measures can be a conservation project, but end of the day, it's going to be a risk factor. So monitoring And if it is going to be a risk factor, then it becomes monitoring, planning, financing, just follows through. But the starting point is why it is needed. And having worked with companies where biodiversity has been, identified as a risk, it's part of the word which all the management students will learn is it's part of their enterprise risk management. So, moment it gets into your enterprise risk management, your CEO will be responsible, you will be responsible. So, it's how the interplay starts happening with the management funders and the management ethos. And then the follows the monitoring and the planning. So, yeah, that's what I feel as a corporate professional. For me, biodiversity would be.
Thanks, Shirin. In fact, there have been a lot of very innovative and significant contributions by various corporates on biodiversity conservation. Of course, Shirin herself has been a big contributor to that cause. In addition to that, just here in Noida, HCL Foundation, for example, has been a big supporter of biodiversity conservation through different ways. Over recent years, there has been a significant interest in the subject of sustainability reporting, disclosure frameworks. There is a lot of talk on that. We'll now move on to Dr. Vaidyanathan, and he's the head of policy development at ACCA. I think the best qualified really to talk on this subject of disclosures and reporting. Dr. Vaidyanathan, there have been significant recent developments globally on natural resources accounting and corporate financial disclosures around natural capital. There's been especially talk about bringing in integrated reporting frameworks into corporate disclosures. I request if you could share with us on your engagement with regards to these developments, and how do you perceive these developments to impact or to contribute to nature or to biodiversity?
Thank you very much, Mr. Sunil, and hi everyone. Just a correction, it's not doctor, I'm a practitioner, but it's a delight to be here, and I'm really honored to be part of this discussion amongst clearly some very, very knowledgeable and eminent individuals. I'd like to, while I come to your question, Mr. Sunil, also just reflect a little bit on some of the comments from the other speakers, which I found very illuminating. I think it's really important, the whole area of biodiversity, and there were a couple of things, even simple examples. For example, things like wheat. When I was growing up, so I've lived outside India for more than 25 years now. But when I was growing up in India, I was not aware of food allergies. For example, it wasn't a conversation. It was something that is, maybe you're not feeling well, but nobody was aware that there's something called a food allergy. And when you think about wheat, for example, there have been examples, and many of others in the panel will be perhaps more familiar with the details. But depending on selective breeding of wheat, there are certain strains of wheat where the gluten content is very high, and certain people are not very tolerant to high levels of gluten in their diet. And if that becomes, for example, the dominant strain of wheat that you're eating, or in the atta that you're eating, then you're going to have impacts across the population without it being very clear what's causing that. I think the other point around being human centric, I think is extremely important, as is the point around the shapes of vegetables. I think it's a very good one. What I tend to find in supermarkets is the subtle change in the words that are used. So what was used before, the way it was expressed before on a product was used by so and so date, and therefore people would throw it away if that date had passed for that food product. So the language that's often preferred is best before so and so date, so that it gives more of a license to continue using that food product rather than throwing it away. So I think these are all, I suppose, link indirectly to circularity and perhaps better use of the existing. But I do think biodiversity is a very important conversation, and it's a global conversation. It's right up there with things like COVID and climate impact which go across national boundaries. If you look at the Amazon rainforest, it's probably the most biodiverse place on the planet. And, that's being routinely destroyed for various political reasons and short-term economic reasons. And the result of that is not something that's going to be only restricted to Brazil, where most of the rainforest is. The entire planet is going to pay the price for the destruction of that biodiversity. So it's really important to think about global solutions for a problem which is fundamentally global. You can't solve a global problem with a completely localized solution. There is value in local solutions because they take into account local contexts and things are adapted differently in different local contexts. There is value in that. But this is such a big picture issue that you need to have a global approach to it. So coming to your question, Mr. Sunil, around standards and so forth, ACCA, for those of you who may or may not know, we're the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants. We are global by DNA. We have members in about 175 countries, including India. And so we think very much in terms of global standards wherever possible. We support that. Certainly on the financial reporting side, we've been big supporters of trying to encourage global standards and global adoption in other work that we do, including in areas like technology. We talk about interoperability of technology across boundaries. I'm only mentioning technology because, funnily enough, it doesn't sound related to this conversation, but a lot of the stuff we look at in things like AI. AI involves large language models and natural language processing. Most of the sustainability reporting is non-financial reporting. It's not numbers, it's words, it's often narrative. And AI is actually much better equipped to analyze that at scale across multiple reports and multiple sources of input than any traditional technology that we've had. So if you really want to get insight out of what different companies are doing, empirical evidence, you're going to need to use tools like AI and large language models potentially. But coming back to your point on reporting, we are very much supportive of global standards wherever possible. There has been historically in this space a complete alphabet soup of different types of bodies and different types of standards that they're trying to put together, all well-intentioned and all well-informed with extremely bright people behind it. The good news is that as of, I think, November 2021, we had the International Sustainability Standards Board convene, and essentially the hope and the plan, and I suppose this is more for our audience, I'm sure others here on the panel and elsewhere are well aware, but the hope and the plan is very much that what the ISSB will do is create a consistent set of standards that can be understood in the same way by stakeholders all around the world. Because the problem with this whole space, so if we come back to the idea of biodiversity financing, and I think Mr. Sunil, you were talking about half of global GDP, 44 trillion, being highly or moderately dependent on nature, and it's also the fact, I think, from one of your own reports that this requires to plug that gap, because the amount it takes to kind of replenish and maintain biodiversity. So I think the number that someone in my team has given me is and I think it's from one of your reports. There's the budget of roughly 800 billion annually, but only about 100 billion is actually currently accounted for in terms of available funding. So basically, $1 out of every $8 we need is currently accounted for. $7 out of $8 is we've got to find it from somewhere. You can't find $7 out of $8 just by pumping more money into it. You've got to also do it by making existing organizations more sustainable and reducing the need to find $8 as well in some way. And that, in order to reduce the need, in order to be able to force organizations to be accountable for their sustainability and biodiversity footprint, we have to have some way of measuring what they're doing. We have to have some consistent way of being able to see what they're doing. And you can't see what they're doing if you don't have a global standard or a commonly understood standard to measure. So that's where things like the ISSB and the global standards come into play, and that's why they're so important. As you mentioned, I think one of the other panelists was talking about, there are a bunch of other standards that are that are in play around the world, and I think our online moderator is probably very familiar. I think she was talking about CSRD as well in the EU. That's obviously a very critical thing that's relatively more advanced and in play. In the UK, nature-related reporting is expected to become mandatory over the next few years. So there's a very active conversation going on in that space right now. And obviously in India, I think in the plenary, the business responsibility and sustainability reporting framework was mentioned, which I think is managed by a SEBI, and I think the top 1,000 listed companies have to follow according to that. So there are clearly lots of things which are going on, and I think the key thing in all of this is. And again, one of the speakers in the plenary talked about voluntary standards. I'm not opposed to voluntary standards, but I firmly believe that if you want to make people do stuff, we're going to have to make this mandatory regulation in some shape or form. We're going to have some degree of oversight or some degree of because I think incentives are important. But I think if you think about corporates, and if I can just respond very finally and to close out, there was a question earlier about incentives to corporates. I think it's more threats to corporates. Where do they see a threat? And I think for me, they see threats if there's a financial risk or there's a non-financial risk, period. Where would they see a financial risk? They would see a financial risk if they see a threat to their supply chain. If you're a palm oil manufacturer or using something in Malaysia around palm oil and you see that your forests are dying out or whatever, or if you see that you're using products that are in your supply chain that simply are not available in the way they were or at a price point that is much higher than what it was. And the answer to solving that is making the ecosystem more biodiverse, and you'll suddenly wake up to the problem. The other kind of non-financial risk is reputation risk. If you think there's a risk of your company being on the front page of a newspaper, you're suddenly going to take it a lot more seriously. So I think those are the kind of things. I'm not being cynical about organizations. I think they are well-meaning, and I think incentives and their ability to try to do the right thing is real. But I think to really move the financial and the kind of the dial at scale across the sector, it's really important to hit some of those hot button, nerve items, as it were. But I'll pause there and leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mr. Vaidyanathan. In fact, you mentioned about the figure of $8 billion, the gap, which is, the good news is that it's less than 1% of the global GDP. So if there is a global effort, it's possible to meet that gap. Just in India, UNDP had done a study a few years back where we mapped the entire funding scenario in terms of biodiversity conservation, and the gap in India is around 40,000 crores. So actually, in a larger perspective, it's not too much. It's more a question of like what you rightly said, of in a way different key stakeholders taking on responsibility, somewhere being nudged into taking on responsibilities also, which takes us to Mr. Jenna. He is the head of Center for Sustainable Finance at the Climate Policy Initiative, a think tank on climate policy. Mr. Jera, you have been intensively engaged in sustainable finance and climate finance initiatives. Where do you think biodiversity figures in sustainable financing priorities, especially considering that we have the more popular frameworks of climate financing, where in a way biodiversity kind of struggles to find its space? So if you could share a bit your thoughts on where biodiversity kind of really comes in the global and the national financing perspective, we would be kind of quite enlightened. Thank you.
Good to be here, and thanks Amity University for inviting me. And biodiversity actually is not really considered as a climate change mitigation or climate change adaptation. Many times it's also called as it's a part of green finance, not climate finance, unfortunately. But it has a dual role to play, both are climate mitigation as well as climate adaptation. For example, we're talking about mangroves, which is peatland, for example, mangroves or peatland. It plays both role, both climate change mitigation and climate change adaptation. But in the space of climate finance, I don't think many people are talking about that. Mostly people talk about renewable energy, clean transportation, green hydrogen. Nobody talks about biodiversity. Even the climate finance tracking, which we do globally. So, for example, last year we find that around 1.2 trillion capital came came for climate finance, which is very, very significant. Although the amount of climate finance required is more than 6 trillion. But in these climate finance flows, nobody talking about how much money went to biodiversity. Although there are some agencies which are monitoring, I think it's close to $100 billion or so, which European Union said. But no conversation, because if we talk to corporates, even if the government department, everybody is talking about how we can move or how we can redirect capital flows for climate mitigation, even if people are not talking about climate adaptation. So one of the reasons is that many of you know there is a market failure in the case of biodiversity, because the people, the corporates or the people who are polluting and creating this mess, they are not paying the price. Okay, so that's the biggest question. And biodiversity is not an independently commercially feasible business. Unfortunately, it plays a significant role, like ma'am says, that 50% of GDP is directly or indirectly derived from biodiversity. But if we take, like in economics, we keep on talking about externalities, both positive externalities and negative externalities, which nobody pays. The benefits derived from biodiversity, nobody pays. So that's the reason in the climate finance conversation, we don't see that people are talking about capital flows for biodiversity. Secondly, even there are discussions going around like natural capital reporting by the corporates. At least the investors and the financier can understand that whether the companies in which they are investing are exposed to biodiversity risk. That's something, a terminology called double materiality, although it is not a part of BRSR currently. So there is a possibility, as we are discussing about, there is something called Task Force for Nature-Based Climate Finance Disclosure, and which going to be mainstreamed in the future. So it will affect a lot how the corporates are reporting concerning biodiversity, because they have to report that how they have affected the biodiversity system as a whole. So it will give a better idea to financial investors what kind of risk they are exposed to when they are investing in a company or so. Number three is that whether there are enough incentives available by the governments. I'm talking about the financial incentives. For example, even the current finance commission, they are seriously considering that can you connect forestry with the finance flows from the central government to state government, which will play a bigger, very, very important role, so that there is enough additional incentives for state government to deploy capital in biodiversity. But beyond that, I don't see any incentives coming from the public sector or the government for the corporates, so that money can be flow to restore biodiversity. Then number four is that whether we have enough financial product or financial mechanism which will help investors and financiers deploy money in biodiversity. Although we know green bonds, or we know about blue bonds, which are recently introduced. The green bonds has been there for last 10, 11 years. Blue bond is a recent phenomenon. Although these financial instruments are there, so most of the time the proceeds of this financial instrument are going to commercially feasible businesses like clean transportation or renewable energy, not really to the solutions, to the nature-based solutions, which need this kind of, I will say, concessional money or grant money, which is missing also, unfortunately. And then number four is that uh, uh, I will bring again those same polluter principle, that whether the corporates, the kind of negative externalities they are creating, whether they are paying. So we keep on hearing about something called carbon pricing in the climate mitigation space. But mostly the carbon pricing is used for climate mitigation. Again, biodiversity is missing there. Carbon mitigation means we are talking about renewable energy. So, in my conversation or in my interaction with corporates, uh, bankers, or financial institutions, policy makers, and regulators, the discussion on biodiversity finance is very, very limited, unfortunately. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. If there is any burning question, just one question we will take at this point of time before we get on to the second round of questions. Yes, sir, please. Sure.
One thing bet on it. I want to touch and get a brief answer. When you get this integrated reporting is also the new buzzword in finance. Not so new. In 2013 got introduced. I was using AI and checking it up. So it will be called compulsory very soon or not? It should be compulsory. But I checked up 50%, 45% of the Nifty index, they're already embraced it, like Wipro, Yes Bank and Reliance on their own, because they've got big muscles, financial muscle. Will it be compulsory soon or some penalties or not? Well, it's not really my place to decide that, to be honest. I certainly hope so. I think that's the direction of travel. If you look globally, there's more or less a trend towards making these requirements quite quite legal, fixed in and mandated. So it wouldn't surprise me if ultimately this moves from because there's also a constraint here, which is you can have all of these standards, but there's a skilling process. People have to know how to comply to this stuff. So, there's a kind of the two things have to go hand in hand. So that also is a process which takes time. But I think the direction of travel, I think, will be in that direction. That be the ESG practitioners also there. New jobs are coming on. ESG practitioner, they got to be non-financial. They need that kind of a skill set. You're right, I suppose. Yes, absolutely, and that is definitely something that is being certainly in various parts of the world being crystallized in real time as we speak. Depending on how the regulations are structured, the ability of people to understand that and how to apply that. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Hello. Yeah, let me answer your question because most of the corporates, even the large corporates we are talking about, so many of them, they are raising capital abroad and they are listed in LSE or NYSE. And the regulations are tightened in these countries. If you are raising capital, maybe issuing bonds or listing themselves, you have to meet their regulations. Okay, so they don't have a choice. They have to abide those regulations. Even the BRSR we keep on discussing, it's keep on revolving actually. So, for example, if tomorrow IFRS is going to integrate this integrated reporting, so Indian accounting standard at some point of time will integrate. But most importantly, it is we need to see that the large corporates, the corporates which are raising capital out, they don't have a choice. They have to report because they are possibly by the financial regulators abroad, the stock exchange, even the civil societies, they are putting pressure on the regulators. Okay, why corporates abroad? They are getting necessary capital from here. They are not reporting what kind of impact they have. So they will. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Dr. Vikas also wanted to.
See, when the IIRC was started being adopted in India, SEBI was in the process of mandating it as a startup, saying that the first 2 years, these set of companies need to do it. The same way that BRR first came into or CSR first came into, which was voluntary and you had to do it or explain it. But unfortunately, COVID happened. So that has delayed the process by at least 3 to 5 years. But it is in the process, it will become mandatory in future.
Yeah, so thanks for the question. In a way, that was the same question which I was going to pose to Dr. Goswami as a follow-up question. But Dr. Goswami, you mentioned about the policies and the challenges, and I think some of our panel members also spoke about it. Is it a challenge of actually insufficient inclusion of stakeholders at a policy making level also? I mean, what is your perception on that, especially when it comes to business and sustainability?
I completely agree with you that the stakeholders are not involved. And even if you look at the way the materiality exercise takes place, having been in so many corporates, good, bad, and ugly, the entire range of it, materiality more often than not is just a lip service. And it doesn't take the rigor that's required to go and consult with the stakeholders. The other unfortunate part of stakeholder engagement is that finance sector or the success of the company is still quarter to quarter and biodiversity is centuries to centuries. How are you going to kind of get the two concepts in sync with each other.
Yeah, thanks, Vikas ji. Shirin, you mentioned a bit about the possible motivations, what really drives or could drive, would drive action around biodiversity conservation. From your perspective, what are some of the low-hanging fruits which corporate, especially like yours, working on energy, could ensure through corporate action impacting biodiversity conservation? Also, one of our panel members also spoke about insufficient policy incentives. What are those policy incentives that you would kind of really look at, which could stimulate action around biodiversity?
Just to answer the low-hanging fruits, low-hanging fruits can just be what we are doing to, say, address the risk. That's very easy to do because that's part of the whole DNA of the company. And just because it's a risk, you have to monitor it and as well as you can report it outside. Yes, I do agree with Mr. Vaidyanathan with the new framework which has come into being and of the double materiality. See, when these frameworks and concepts starts taking shape in a company, then the reporting would become much more stringent because these companies will then start realizing that, of course, whether it's a risk or it is, you're just not talking about climate risk, but you're talking about the sustainability risk and gives a better and a larger picture. And that's when the actual monitoring will start happening and reporting will start happening. But the low-hanging fruit for any corporate today to start is just, start talking about what we are doing as part of your business. And that's what most of us do. In our sustainability report, you open the section on biodiversity, you will get a 2-page report on what the company is doing as part of their environmental management practice. So that's there. Or what they are doing to ensure sustainable land practice. So you get a case study. That's all. And I think that's where, most of the corporates are restricting itself. They are not monetizing the impact because that's something which will require a more advanced, maturity level also within the management, also because that's where it's also important. And the policy incentives, a lot of the corporates, if they are operating in a biodiversity sensitive area, and let them do that. While the government will say, okay, you go and set up a plant there, it can be in a biodiversity sensitive area, and then the corporate is penalized by, say, the civil society because you have damage. So it's a chicken and egg situation for the corporates. They are concerned because the government is pushing to set up, and what will happen if, for example, I just give you an example. When the offshore wind projects was to come to India, everybody was so excited, but offshore wind projects led that, it's going to harm the aquatic life, say, of Gulf of Gujarat or Madras. And there were a lot of concerns that, if we have to set up these offshore projects, how are we going to take care of the livelihood of the fishermen's work, depending on these products. And the corporates started backing out because it was way beyond their, financial purse, because that would mean extending. And that's where the corporates felt that that's where the government needs to come up with policies which is going to support. You may come up with the 500 gigawatt million strategy, but if you don't give us the corporates that the policy support and the financial incentives, and also support if they're going into such venture areas, then it's going to be a huge risk and companies will start backing out from that area. So yeah, there are certain, we also look to the government to support us in that.
Thanks, Shirin. Mr. Vaidyanathan, I'll just take off from where Shirin also mentioned about the inadequacies. Excuse me, I can understand that you're very excited with all the discussions, but please do kind of maintain the decorum of the panel. We would appreciate the questions when we open up the forum for discussion, please. Thank you. Mr. Vedanathan, there seem to be kind of significant either inadequacies or maybe a reluctance in terms when it comes to reporting, especially around biodiversity. Either it's not sufficiently understood, or there are other factors which kind of are holding back sufficient reporting. In your experience, or from your perspective, how do you think financial reporting, or even non-financial reporting, could better integrate? What is required to be done really to make that reporting much stronger from a perspective like biodiversity?
Thank you. And again, if I can just pick up on one or two things that were said earlier, which are really important. So I think you made a point around the commerciality of the products, so the green financing products, and whether they are sufficiently commercial. And I think, Madam Vikas, you made a point around the quarterly cycle of reporting, and how that fits with a longer term financing horizon. So I think that's an elephant in the room problem. And the only way you can, to my mind, solve that is you have to have development funding. It has to be by organizations that are willing to do things for a non-commercial return. You can't leave that purely to a commercial market-based solution, because it's not commercial. I think it's trying to ignore what is an obvious reality, at least in the short term. Maybe over time it'll become commercially viable, but it really needs the IFCs, the development financing organizations of the world, to very, very strongly step in here. But putting that to one side, to your point, so on, when we think about it, certainly from say if I step into the ACCA accountancy profession, our members of all the way from newly qualified to CFO, FD, that's the sort of ladder. The first thing I think which this conversation needs in any organization is board level buy-in. There's absolutely no point, however many experts you've got across the organization, it makes no difference. You need board level buy-in. It has to be top down. And you need someone sitting at the board table to be able to make the case to say, we need to do two things. First of all, we need to stop talking about CSR as a kind of charity thing where we put a little bit of money on the side towards some good causes. We just need to stop doing that. It's a complete waste of time. Maybe not, but that's my view anyway. My view is that if we need someone at the board table who says either this thing absolutely integrates into our business model, or we just don't bother with it. Let's just cut out the pretenses. So if it has to absolutely integrate into our business model, it has to be top down, starting from the board. And that has a few things. One, it has to be clear how this fits in with our strategy as an organization. Two, how does it fit in terms of the data we will need to collect? Because there's a very limited understanding of what data you actually need to collect in your organization. Even if you have the intention, yes, you've got, for certain aspects of it, you have SBT, science-based targets, and KPIs, and certain elements of, but now with the EU, with the CSRD, it's not, and that, by the way, is not necessarily biodiversity. You're going into an even more very specific thing. The EU CSRD probably requires about 1,000 data points, which is quite a lot. But I don't know how much of that will be directly speaking to your question, which is quite a specific point on biodiversity. But that is an important start. At least you have what data do you need to collect? And the third thing is, what governance are you going to have in your organization to figure out if, the data you're collecting has any reliable quality associated with it? Because the biggest issue is going to be data quality and data availability. So I think those are really the key aspects that I think at an organizational level will be really critical if this has to kind of move from the good intentions into something which feels a bit more implementable.
Yeah, Shirin, please.
So, just to what Mr. Vedanathan said, everybody's talking about SBTI, net zero. But actually, companies who have gone through the rigor of SBTI, the fact is, when they ask for targets, they also look at your land management practice. And they ask questions, what kind of land you use for your manufacturing, and then it's converted to an emission So it boils down, yes, what is the data mining? And what is the understanding? Because if we don't understand, and it's a fact, I'm working in that place, a lot of people from whom I gather data, they don't even understand what I'm asking for. So it's just not the first man, it also is, I do agree. And with all due respect to you, sir, even the financial people, when they come that what non-financial numbers mean to the PNL, there is a gap. So it's I would say it's a journey, but it also depends on the maturity level of the company to which they are. And, yesterday I was on a call with one of my financial investors and they were talking about this CSR. And I got a 200-page data set and it was this humongous. And, 200-page data set for a company to report, which is mandatory, is just not possible. So they are moving so fast while we are still here. There's also a gap which is there for us to fulfill on that part. Yeah. So that's where all people need to come together.
I do know that WBCSD is doing some work on how to convert non-financial indicators into financial numbers. So that it's easier to report and from a financial perspective.
Yeah, interesting. Thanks a lot, Mr. Vedanath. I think it's an exciting point of discussion, really. Mr. Jena, you mentioned you gave a very realistic kind of picture of where biodiversity really figures in terms of the financing scenario. How do you think we could kind of bring biodiversity financing up in terms of priority? Of course, Mr. Vedyanathan also alluded to that in his comments. But from a climate financing, from a larger financing kind of perspective, how do you think, there was a time when climate financing itself was in a very nascent stage and nobody took it very seriously. But we know today it's like, it's extremely important in any financing discussion, especially at the global level. How do you think we can bring biodiversity financing up the priority? And are there any potential specific financing instruments that you think might kind of fit well within the constraints that the biodiversity sector faces?
Definitely, actually. So, as Mr. Vedyanathan said, that biodiversity is independently not a commercial business. We need public finance or concessional finance all the time to make it commercially feasible. So, as we know that public finance is limited. So you cannot expect that public finance coming to every sectors or every projects. That's not possible. So the only way is that how to leverage the existing public capital to attract private capital. So for that, we need to develop business models. Which will define a clear set of revenues and clear set of cost assumptions as well. For example, if we see the biodiversity, what kind of benefits we are deriving from biodiversity? Take the example of peatland. Peatland is helping us in reducing floods in cities, and it reduces climate mitigation because it is a store of carbon sequestration. And it means that the local people are getting the benefits of peatland. But unfortunately, the local authorities, for example, municipalities, are not paying the services of peatland. So it is important that we need to identify, one is the number of the kind of benefits we are getting, and who are the stakeholders to be engaged in a business model. Secondly, that the source of finance. Once we identify, okay, these are the benefits, okay, these are the revenue flows in the next 30 years, 40 years, even 100 years. So we can say that, okay, how much money we need. So there where we need the business model or need to identify the source of financing. As Mr. Vedyanathan says, definitely biodiversity is not an independent business model, independent commercial feasible project. You need to combine both public capital and private capital. And here also, for example, in the case of peatland, let's say insurance companies which pays whenever there is a damage, there is a physical damage to any facilities. For example, in a nearby peatland, which is helping companies to reducing the physical damage, it's the insurance companies which is getting the benefits. So can be an insurance company, be an investor in the initial phase because they are getting the benefits out of peatland. Secondly, for example, a cities which is getting clean water from that peatland, so are they providing money? Regular cash flows is coming from that peatland for many years to come. So can they commit a power purchase agreement? Number three is that, for example, if any peatland or any seagrass, it is helping us in reducing carbon emission because it's a massive source of carbon sequestration. So can carbon credit sold from this particular biodiversity project? It can be sold on international market at a right price. The idea is that in the business model is that we need to stabilize the revenue flows for the next many years, maybe 50 years and 100 years or so. Then we can say that what is the cost of restoration is required for the number of years. Then we can have an idea that what is the amount of capital required from public sources, without which we cannot raise private capital as well. In the case of any public infrastructure project, we keep on hearing about public-private partnership, where many times the public sector say, okay, so you invest everything, I will pay you over a period of time. So that kind of model can also be feasible in the case of biodiversity projects. Secondly, for example, we're talking about green bonds. Although green bonds, when started, it started with a noble idea, but no, now, I mean, green bond is not a great source of actually capital because the green premium is gone. There is no incentives for any borrower to raise capital through issuance of green bonds. Those incentives are gone. Although there is a concept called halo effect, which is still there, which is giving benefits. Number two is that what could be other source of revenue? For example, we are talking about carbon cess. Okay, in the case of carbon cess, can we put a cess on biodiversity? Okay, the corporates which are creating the problem at biodiversity, and it's called biodiversity cess, for example, and the revenue generated from biodiversity cess can only be used in restoration of biodiversity project. That could be another source of capital. Then another source of capital could be the ecosystem services. Like ma'am said that 50% of GDP are directly relied on biodiversity. The company is from biodiversity project. Can they pay accordingly the ecosystem services they are giving? So if we combine all these revenue sources and estimate the cost assumptions, then we can say that okay, at time zero, we need this is the amount of public capital or this is the amount of private capital. Then it can be a self-sustainable project. At the end of the day, the project should be self-sustainable or financially viable. Otherwise, we can no way attract private capital because mostly 80-90% of public is of biodiversity finance, and we cannot rely on public sector forever. So we need to see that how cash flow generation can come from biodiversity project, which will help or motivate private investors to put their money in biodiversity project. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Jha. It was extremely insightful. Thank you. We'll now open up the session for any questions that the audience may be having. I think our friends there at the back who've been in deep discussions can maybe now the time, go for it.
Can raise your hands. There are any questions. I think they are being shy, so I would just like to ask.
Please, sir, please.
So, sir, it's a question open for the panelists. Would you like to shed some light on the mechanisms which are currently adopted to measure the impact of biodiversity conservation projects? So that acts as a real-time metric to measure what all organizations are doing.
You want to?
There can be different ways of measuring it. If you are doing a watershed project, you will look at the soil bacteria that you have and the variety and the percentage of bacteria in the soil, and look at that. Soil health can be one of them. If you are doing a trees project, then you will look at the afforestation density and the survival rates. If it's an animal species project, you will look at has the species increased, has there what do you call it in wild what do you call it progenies are being are they having children in the wild if they were introduced in a new area. So for a different, each project will have to have a different kind of criteria. I'll give an example here. Godrej Properties was building a uh, construction project in Greater Noida, and we found that there were snakes in the land that was we had bought, and also there were monitor lizards. We also got to know that in the surrounding builders were putting a gas into the soil that would destroy all the snakes. The moment we sustainability team got to know us about it, because the person who was operating the site asked us what can be done. So we said, let's not do that. We contacted Wildlife SOS. They captured all the snakes. We captured actually two endangered species, and we also captured a monitor lizard. We captured that and introduced into the forest behind, further away, so that the biodiversity from that area can, because the topography and the geography remains the same, can be introduced elsewhere. While the other builders in the area were introducing gas into the soil so that especially the reptiles could be destroyed. Did Godrej Properties price per unit of the flat they were selling improve? I doubt it. Have people started buying products because they are more sustainable, they have a biodiversity smaller footprint? I doubt it. So from what angle you want to look at a problem will define the criteria you would use.
In this aspect, will the biodiversity credit for biodiversity bonds be helpful in the conditions of India so that it acts as a motivating factor to companies?
I'm not a finance person.
So that, Shane, did you want to respond to the previous question? Yeah, maybe I think Mr. Vaidyanathan or.
No, there is no biodiversity bond or so. There is nothing called a biodiversity bond. But yes, green bonds are also used in the case of biodiversity project, because at the end of the day, it is helping in both climate mitigation and climate adaptation. Here, the technology is playing very, very important. For example, satellite imaging is also used in biodiversity project as well. What kind of benefits is deriving, as well as the blockchain technologies to reduce the green impact, greenwashing concept. Actually, the blockchain technologies are also used so that, for example, there are some grant investors based in United States and Europe, and if they are putting money, they would like to see the benefits. Okay, how much carbon is sequestered, what is the size of that particular plant or so. Okay, so these benefits can be quantified by using by using satellite imaging technologies. So, for example, there are companies like Conservation International. They are doing massive biodiversity project, I think, in Bolivia. So there is a fancy instrument called nature-based solution. It's called debt for swap. For example, the government of Bolivia, they raised public debt from outside, and the debt was written off on the condition that they will maintain that biodiversity project. Okay, that's one of the conditions of the investors who put money in that particular biodiversity project. So that kind of finance instrument is also there. Thank you.
So Vaidyanathan, is there?
No, I think it's been covered. I suppose just one very quick observation just on the biodiversity bonds is ultimately, there's a cash flow element to all of this. So, you have to have a proposition that's going to feel that there's a cash flow generating element to repay, because it's ultimately a loan product. So I think, we're quite far away from that. I think at the moment we don't even understand how to, segregate what the financial characteristics of this element of it are in real detail, and which is why the point around public-private financing, because there's an element of putting money in, even if you're not entirely sure what the return is, which is part of the problem.
Thank you. Yeah, it's
great pattern, pressure is to you and also congratulations to your answers. So putting this out in the discussion, more on climate and currently we focus on biodiversity. So my question is, most of the discussions were on the direct impact of companies on biodiversity. Being a supply chain professional, I'm worried about the direct impacts of the company's supply chain on biodiversity. emissions. We have the scope 3 emissions, so we can now track things, and we have more measures in place. And that's where more consensus on how to measure these supply chain impact of emissions. So what are your thoughts on the supply chain indirect impact on biodiversity, and how are companies doing so at all, doing anything on addressing this?
I think most of the companies, rightly said, are just doing scope 3, which is mapping the GHG emission. And that too is, as you are rightly aware, supply chain mapping, scope 3 emission mapping is a humongous task for any corporate or a ESG professional. So it's still a far-fetched idea of measuring the indirect impact of biodiversity on a company's supply chain. At this moment, everybody is struggling with, just taking care of their supply chain issues of demand and supply. On top of that, now the pressure is to decarb your supply chain. So that's another added pressure. All this leading to the costing of the product. So most of us are struggling with that element. To introduce this element, I think it will be too much of a pressure for a company to bear at this moment, because it's a difficult proposition. And for a professional who is supposed to map the indirect impact, I think it will take a decade or two to even think about it. It's too early to talk about it.
Greening of the supply chain that we're talking about, and not just the emissions and other indicators as well. We have seen that even with social indicators, when you look at supply chain, in countries like India, the supply chain just dissipates. You don't know where the level 3 to level 4, who are the connectors, you sometimes miss it. And from level 3 to level 6, you definitely don't know about it. Biodiversity is even more complex than the social indicators. So as Shireen just said, it'll take some time to get there. And on the other side, my colleagues here can actually substantiate that. We don't even have the indicators in place as to how would we measure it.
Yeah. So thanks for the question, and I think great question. Yeah, please.
I mean, your answer regarding the reptiles under that area is really giving me a concern and showing a concern, because I'm human beings and all the creatures on the equal level. So, because most of the people are living here, and when you told when you gave this example, it was a new concern for me also, because I had it for the first time. So, how we can make people aware about biodiversity, and how these small issues which have been impacting the environment, how we can make people educated about all these things. Because man is a human being, which is very much, man is breathing, and they just fulfill their own needs. Until and unless something related to some benefit is going to be with me, they will not do something major. Like you gave the example of Godrej properties, where the concern was to safeguard the reptile, but others are not concerning about it. So what can be done? How we can educate the people, the general people, about these concerns?
It's a difficult question. I wish I had the answer. In the previous session, somebody talked about social contract. The social contract that we have amongst ourselves and with the environment seems to be eroding. We are living in NCR. About a month and a half ago, we had Diwali. Did we stop bursting crackers? The social contract completely eroded there. Biodiversity is still too complex to understand. This is an immediate threat to all our health. So I wish I had an answer. I don't. There are information, education, communication experts who would have an answer to that. The one good thing is that now environment, climate, and biodiversity is something that is taught across rank and file in all schools, thanks to Dr. Kalam, our ex-president. So that's happened. But there's also something known as knowledge gap. I hope most of us will know here. The knowledge, the attitude, and the practice. The knowledge is there, the attitude and the practice, the link is completely missing on so many things on social contract. Until we can connect those dots, I doubt it will be happening.
I don't even basic level observation. Very basic level, what pets, dogs at home. We don't keep birds, pets, and whatever birds, other things. So that kind of really is also missing. We can all start at our own level. Absolutely. And thanks for a great discussion and insight.
It's not only about Diwali. Then the marriage season is going on. People are so excited. The crackers are on everywhere. Like it depends upon how much excited you have been. Every time they need celebration and they just want to create a chaos in their environment. And I think all the students who are seated here, they should, give your ears there because it's a very good conversation which is going on here. If we just put attention to the present moment, we can be successful every moment. Believe me. And thank you for your presence.
Yeah, thank you very much. If there are no more questions, we're getting signals from the organizers to wind up. I would like to really thank the panel. It's been a wonderful discussion. I hope, Dr. Punita, that the recording of this session will be made available to all of us. It's been a really rich and a very realistic discussion. I think no talk in the air, which was very important. With that, we'll end over here. Biodiversity is no doubt, as has been mentioned, a very complex, relatively complex subject. We need a whole lot of minds coming together, a whole lot of sectors coming together for collective action. Thank you very much for the audience also. You've been very patient. I know we've kind of gone into lunchtime. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Sir, sorry, I just take 5 minutes. We have done one presentation, a small one.
Really sorry,
It's okay.
Dr. Punita. Yeah, we
It's
missed
fine.
your presentation. Please.
All the points in this presentation, I think almost all the points have already been discussed. But since we have done a small research, so I would just like to present, like ma'am said, that we are moving from BRR to BRSR. So we have done a small research on this, assessing the maturity level of sustainability reporting in India. Quickly, I'll just take 5 minutes and present some findings. Right. So I think motivation is all there, what all we have discussed. So that's the motivation. Why we need sustainability reporting, I'll not get into that. So sustainability reporting in India already has been discussed that we are having BRR earlier, and now it's a BRSR, the Business Responsibility and Sustainability Reporting, which has been made mandatory since 2021 for the top 1,000 companies, right? So first, actually, I have done a comparison of BRR versus BRSR. Why we needed that? BRSR is a more comprehensive framework, which is having more, both quality-wise and quantity-wise, more information from what the company is doing on the sustainability parameters. Different parameters are there. And then we also have done a comparison, BRSR with the global reporting indicators, because GRI is the framework which is followed across many countries. Around 65 countries they found they are using GRI. So that comparison we have also done that certain there are certain points.
We'll just say goodbye to Mr. Vaidyanathan. Thank you very much. Your perspectives have been extremely good.
Okay, then I talk about the sustainability reporting maturity model, which is being introduced by Institute of Chartered Accountant of India. Rather, Dr. Nandita, the one who joined us online from Sweden, she has got another meeting, we delayed only. So she left. She is also part of building, and me and there was a team of 5 of us who were part of developing this maturity model. It's a scoring scale which has been given by ICAI. Ma'am, you must be knowing that. So we have used this scale to calculate the score for the top 100 Indian companies, excluding the financial sector. So that is what we have done here. So this is what is the maturity level. So the maturity level 2. Now we have got 84 companies under our preview, what we have started. Out of 84 companies, 2 companies which are having a score between 25% to 50% of the total score. And 69 companies are scoring above 50%. Because there are certain parameters which just have to report. But the point is quality of reporting. So the quality of reporting, if you go to level 4, we have only 3 companies in India which are giving that type of quality of reporting which is required. So here we have done a comparison of BRR versus the BRSR score for the different journal disclosures, and the different principles which are there under the sustainability reporting. And you can see the principle 7 and the principle 8. Principle 6 is on the environmental. People are doing environmental, but not biodiversity, definitely. But the environmental aid principle, which is a big point of concern for the policymakers, because it talks about social impact assessment. They're doing, but how to do, like what we are talking here, how to do that assessment, that is the big question. So companies are losing points on that impact assessment. So that's what we have calculated. So these are the different industries. So this is industry wise average score. I'm just quickly skipping the slides because of the time paucity. And okay, this was an industry wise comparison. We have taken 8 industries and industry wise comparison also. And I would like to say IT sector and the service sector, which is doing much further, but they are not getting the score because we don't have a score separate for the manufacturing and service sector. For service sector, we don't get score for the workers. There are so many points where you get score for the workers, but they don't have workers, so they lose the points. I think ICI or the other regulators, they should make a different scale for the manufacturing sector and for the service sector.
I was one of the writers of the principle. The 9 principles that I
Oh, definitely. Right. And this is an age-wise, we wanted to check whether young companies or middle-aged companies or an established companies, they are doing better reporting. But I don't find any much significant difference. All the companies, whether you're young companies, less than 25 years old, they are also into the good level of sustainability reporting. So these are our findings, which I think I have already told. Observations are there, but I would like to, because ma'am is here from the policymakers, I would like to just put on this part, policy implications. First thing, like I told, separate scale for manufacturing and service sector. Second, we need to identify public and private. Students, please, can you just excuse us for last 2 minutes? That's it. I know you are desperate to go for lunch. Just give me 2 minutes. Finally, I'm winding up. We need to identify public and private sector agencies who will be helping the companies in independent assessment. Because, assessment is very important. Once they know how we are going to be assessed, they will know how we have to perform on those parameters. So that is the point we have taken up. And if we want to make BRSR at par with the international standards, GRI and other scales, they are also having economic parameters. We are not having any economic parameters in BRSR. If you can include it, because then we want BRSR to be one point, one report where it's a total assessment of the performance of a company. So we can include such, and even social parameters. The companies are more relying on CSR report rather than reporting in BRSR. So if some points of social performance can also be added in BSR, it will give a comprehensive look to the BSR as one framework for India. And more training programs should be, like we have already discussed in the panel, more training programs of how to report and what to report. That has to be initiated by the government. And like I've already, some factors of biodiversity conservation and support for marginalized communities. What actually the companies should do, I think that more we need to bring it in picture. We need to bring it in focus so that they will start working on this. And then guidelines should be issued for assessment of ESG parameters. We have already discussed for the value chain partners. So thank you so much. So this was a brief presentation of the work, what we are doing.
Thank you, Dr. Ponita. Thank you very much. I'm really sorry for missing your presentation during the session. Thanks again, once again. Please give a round once again to all the panel members of applause. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I especially thank Sunil Padaleji for moderating the session and for contributing to the conference. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. I request all the guests, all the dignitaries to join us for the lunch in the F-2 auditorium.
Amity College of Commerce and Finance, and it is an international conference. The topic of this conference is business transformation for sustainable entrepreneurship and value creation. So my special thanks goes to our session chairs, Dr. Lavanya Prakash Jina. He is head and Center for Sustainability Finance Climate Policy Initiative, Delhi, and Dr. Niti Nandini, Professor in Finance, Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, Delhi, Dr. Pallavi Kishore, Senior Lecturer and Head Accounting and Finance, Middlesex University, Dubai, who has joined us online for sparing their valuable time. And we definitely will be benefited with their expertise and their expert knowledge, which will be the participants will be, sharing with. And I'm equally thankful to all my colleagues, participants, students, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us in this conference. Apart from that, I would like to brief about the schedule which we are going to follow in this. Each paper will be given at best 9 minutes, and 7 minutes is the first bell which will be going with. So this is to mean the 7 minutes are there. So they have the volunteers are there who will suggest you. That's the 7 minutes on. Then 8 minutes the balance, and the final 9 minutes when they say it means stop. So because we need to adhere with, then the question round session with the experts. And finally, I request, and even that is a part of your evaluation also, how within the timeline the things are matching up. So I request to the participant to maintain the timeline with 9 minutes per se. So, and apart from that, this is the thing, and I'm equally, thankful for your timely presence. And really, let's begin the session. And I request Anasri to carry forward the session, introduce our chief guest, or introduce our both the session chairs, so that we can carry forward the things. Please.
Thank you, ma'am. So now I'll be briefing you about the session chair. Mr. Lavanya Prakash Jaina is working as the head of the Center for Sustainable Finance Program in Climate Policy Initiative in India. Lavanya has rich and diversified experience of over 18 years in financial services, non-profit institutions, technical assistance in international development and academy. Before returning to CPI, he worked as a regional climate finance advisor at the Commonwealth Secretariat. In his earlier stint at CPI, he worked as a manager, climate finance for over 5 years. He also worked as an energy finance consultant at the World Resource Institute. Lavanya has also worked as a sustainable finance consultant at UNDP, leading in developing India's sustainable finance roadmap in association with the Ministry of Finance, Government of India. Mr. Lavanya holds a master's in economics and is a CFA charter holder from CFA Institute. Currently, a doctoral scholar at XLRI Jamshedpur, conducting research in the area of climate finance. He is a certified expert in ESG and impact investing from the Frankfurt School of Finance and Management. He is an author, regular columnist, and speaker on climate and sustainable finance in various platforms, media, events, and a visiting faculty at different business schools. Then we have Dr. Niti Nandini Chatnani. She is a distinguished professor of finance at the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, New Delhi, with a wealth of experience spanning over 2 decades. Holding a PhD in microcredit and women's economic empowerment, she is an accomplished educator and administrator. Dr. Chatnani has taught a range of courses including corporate finance, financial derivatives, and supply chain finance, contributing significantly to both graduate and executive management programs. As a confidence convert, she organized the 8th edition of IAFT's International Conference on Empirical Issues at International Trade and Finance. Beyond teaching, she has served in various administrative capacities such as Controller for Examination and Chairman for the Contract Committee. Dr. Chatnani has authored books on commodity market and derivatives, and her extensive list of publications include research articles, case studies, and contribution to esteemed journals. Nobly, she has led research products for government bodies and guided several PhD scholars. Her commitment to academia is underscored by accolades such as the Best Teacher in Financial Management Award and recognition as an accredited management teacher. Dr. Chatnani's multifaceted contributions extend to her involvement in professional bodies, editorial boards, and as a member of various committees, reflecting her dedication to advancing education and research in finance. Then we have Dr. Pallavi Kishore, joined us online. She stands as the distinguished head of the Department of Accounting and Finance at the Business School, boasting an illustrious 18-year career in teaching and research. Armed with a PhD in economics, Dr. Kishori's specialization lies in investments, FDI, and finance, showcased through her groundbreaking and doctoral research that uniquely integrates macro and micro perspectives. This dual approach provides a comprehensive understanding of FDI's economic dynamic globe. Her macro level exploration delves into broader economic trends and policies influencing FDI flows, contributing valuable insights to international economic. Simultaneously, macro level analysis explores intricate details and implications at the industry and firm levels, offering nuanced perspective on FDI and financial factors. Dr. Kishori commitment to a holistic understanding of FDI underscores her soul in international economics. In addition to her academic probes, Pallavi's professional standing as a chartered accounting and statistician is affirmed by her FCCA and AAUE memberships. Recognized as SFHEA UK, she emphasizes student oriented education and mentoring, actively contributing to research in education and guiding students through dissertation. Dr. Kishori's impact transcends academia, evident in her numerous accolades, including Innovation Award for Teaching and Learning Distinction and Excellence in Teaching and Student-Centered Learning, CIMA, Campus Culture Award in 2020, Global Silver, and a Certificate of Appreciation in 2013 for continuous support of the ACC qualifications. As the head of department, Pallavi leads with excellence, meddling, academic expertise, professional experience, and a fervor for creating an innovative learning environment. So, now I would request the session chairs to please give us a brief thought about the theme sustainable finance.
So I must congratulate the conference organizers for picking up this theme for the conference and for actually discussing around sustainability in various ways. And I think the recently concluded book. So not with Dana, a lot of very popular topics. So I think we're excited to hear what the scholars are doing that and I'm sure it's really very important for policy. Gradual climate transition.
Thank you. Thanks, and congratulations. Good to know that Wiki University identified showing of that amount of capital required for climate access, which is a very, very niche term around sustainability. It's massive. For example, if you see here in India, India's green economic transition may intend to get $10 to $12 billion years. But at the same time, if we see climate change in the financial community, there is a lot of chaos, there is a lot of noise, there is a lot of misinformation coming around. As an academician, or academic researcher, it is important to inform the market of our participants, take the right decisions, how to integrate climate change in investment decision making. Like Dr. Niti said, that there is a lot of changes. There is would help in directing capital from
At the same time, I request Dr. Pallavi Kishore to kindly put few words on this conference.
Thank you very much for the opportunity and for making me part of this this conference. I must congratulate the organizers for organizing this conference around such an important theme around sustainable finance. Sustainable finance is not just a trendy term, it's a lot more than that. It is a critical intersection between economic growth and environmental responsibility, a responsibility that all of us have to take on now so that as we enter the future, we can pave way for a more resilient future. And integrating these ESG, environmental, social, governance factors into our decision making is what can make a positive change in ensuring economic stability. So thank you once again to the organizers for having this strong theme with which we can move forward. And I really look forward to hearing everyone on their topic, on this topic further today. Thank you.
So much, ma'am, for the kind words, and you have put in the things. And really, I completely agree with the messages. The sustainable finance which we are talking about is one of the emerging needs and one of the really real requirement for saving the environment, giving the across Delhi is famous for. And it's a need of the hour, so I really appreciate your organizer also for giving such an to go with the conference. And with this, I just
Thank you. So now we welcome our honorable session chair with the honorable gratitude to the family. Neha ma'am, please kindly join us. Our first author is Ms. Nisha Goyal, PGDAV College, Delhi University, Delhi, India, and Dr. Rupali Mishra, Amity University, Noida. Afternoon to one and all present here. I am Nisha Goyal, Assistant Professor, PGDAV College, University of Delhi, and a research scholar at the Amity University.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to present my paper in front of such an august audience. My paper is Exploring Behavior Biases in Stock Market Investment, a study on the effect of expert recommendation. Okay, so before starting, I just want to start with a question. How do you choose a stock to invest in the stock market? Actually, when I start my journey of investing in the stock market, the biggest challenge is how I choose a stock to invest in the stock market. Actually, there are, in case of Bombay Stock Exchange, there are more than 6,000 companies which are listed in the stock market, and in NSE National Stock Exchange, there are more than 1,500 companies are listed in the market. So how I choose a single stock? So this is the biggest challenge. So I consult with my friends, my family, and then come the picture of expert recommendations. It really influenced my decision that because they are expert, and for the expert, I want to explain what it include in the expert. I include both the stock analysts which are registered with the SEBI and the stock analysts which are not registered with the SEBI, and brokerage firms. And now the new trend is coming, that is the fin influencer. That is the major trend in the scenario. Fin influencer is basically the person or the group of person who give the advice or suggestions on the social media, who give the advice and suggestions to invest in the stock market on social media, maybe on the YouTube, maybe on the Instagram, or maybe on the Facebook. They are providing the suggestions and tips, and definitely it will influence the audience, it will influence the investors. In our evolving landscape of the financial market, the influence of expert recommendation is very important factor in shaping investment intention and behavior. And mostly individuals who starting the journey of investment have limited knowledge and prone towards making the psychological errors, and that is the point of my biases. And the behavior finance, already there are many studies about the cognitive bias and emotional biases. And one more thing, after pandemic, the number of investors are increasing in India. Before pandemic, it is around 2% of our population who are investing in the stock market. The situation is changing. Still, we are very less. It is around 3 to 4% of our population which are investing in the stock market. But the data from the SEBI shows that around 4 lakh investor monthly average of 4 lakh investor in 2019-20 who started investing, who opened their new demat account, is shifted to 26 lakh in a month, from 4 lakh to 26 lakh. So number of people start investing is increasing, maybe because of the convenient at the time of pandemic, or the huge return which is provided at that time. And brokerage firms like Zerodha, Upstock, Angel One, traditional players like HDFC Securities share the data that more than double their new customers since the pandemic. And social media allow investors to get easily access the advice and provide inexpensive, without any cost, the commission free advice, and something influence in their mind to choose the stock. The new wise investor, the new investors using these apps often make poor investing decisions due to the behavioral factors. And this is the data about the social media influencer market, which is in 2022 is around 1,275 crore, and it's expected to grow at the compound annual growth rate of 19 to 20%, and it will reach 2,800 crore by 2027. So huge scope. So regulator is concerned about this particular area and particular domain, and talking about the fin influencer and the potential risk they pose by entering in the investment decision of investors at various forums. And that's why in their SEBI latest consultation paper proposed to disrupt the model for fin influencer so that preserve the incentive in the ecosystem. Expert recommendations truly impact the stock market. There are many studies which expert recommendation which impact the stock market. It impact the stock price, it impact the trading volume, but there is a gap in the study that how the expert recommendation influence the investor intention and behavior. So my special focus is on identifying the biases induced by the investor recommendations. the objective is to identify and elucidate any biases that may be induced by the expert recommendation, maybe consciously and unconsciously. So the research methodology which I use is the qualitative personal interview approach. For this, I use the semi-structured interviews, and I collected the data of 55 investors who invest in the stock market. And I use the purposeful sampling for this data to ensure a diverse and representative sample of the investors. And the sample I selected from the homogeneous population who invest in the market and have a demat account. And the sample is heterogeneous as it has different characteristics, attributes based on their age, gender, experience, occupation, education, and income. This is my data of 55 semi-structured interviews. So in nutshell of my data is that we have around in the category of age of 18 to 25, we have 22 investors. In the category of 26 to 35, 8 investors. On the basis of education, we have different categories like graduate, postgraduate. So quickly, I just want to move on these data. But the interpretation the interview were conducted either in person or through virtual platforms. Around 19 interviews were taken physically and 26 virtually. An interview guide was developed to ensure consistency across interview and while allowing for flexibility to explore emerging themes. And then I transcribed all the data, and then the content analysis was performed, and emergent themes are presented one after the other, backed with the verbatim quotations, the direct quotations, which I get at the time of interview. These are my biases, which I found after the content analysis. These are the sum of the biases. These are the like recency bias, anchoring bias, confirmation bias.
7 minutes up.
Representative bias, framing effect, overconfidence bias, halo effect. These are the sum of the biases which I get after the data analysis, and these are the general impact on the mindset of the investors. That investor believe that they get the information, education, and knowledge, and get the advice about the market, awareness of the personal finance, fill the gap in the financial literacy, and help in identification of stock for further research, guide in disciplined investment approach. And these are my implications. These are the biases, and implication is these biases have implication for individual investors, financial advisors, and policymakers, emphasizing the need for more balanced and informed approach to investment decision making. Here, I want to mention one more SEBI announcement, which is recently given by SEBI in May 2023. SEBI has announced new guidelines for the investors, advisors, and the research analysts, bearing the use of technical and legal words as well as the guaranteed return in their promotion. So it is very relevant topic and really need the attention of the regulators. This is the future scope of my research, or the limitation of my research, because I use the qualitative method. So a quantitative investigation based on the finding of this study is required to provide a reasonable explanation, and larger scale of survey can be used. And because my data is limited to the India only, so further studies can be conducted across other countries to provide comparative assessment of the behavioral tendency of individual investors. And lastly, there is a scope for future research to check how the biases induced by experts shape the behavior of investors and decision making. And this is my reference, which I use in the PPT. Thank you so much. And I am open for the Q&A. Thank you so much for your patience listening. Thank you, ma'am. The expert recommendation.
Align it with the theme of this conference, sustainable finance. Probably examine and specify this question to do expert recommendations induce biases towards sustainable investing. Yes. One hypothesis could be that they do not encourage investors to go for sustainable investing, and the alternate could be that they do encourage them. however you want to. But we want to see whether expert recommendations have been actually pushing investors to go for sustainable investing, or have they that you should stay away from that because it's still not legal. It's more of a social kind.
Yes, yes, ma'am. Because the investors are more prone to the gain only.
And so if you could do a research like that, then SEBI could probably also bring in a clause, that expert
Yes.
recommendations should not bias investors.
Actually create the awareness among the investors also, that how they take a informed decision. Right. Right.
Yeah, so Dr. Niti has already said that, the missing point is the sustainability aspect, which is the theme of the conference. Particularly retail investors in India, they are not concerned about sustainability. Even if the ESG fund, the famous ESG fund, which launched by, I think, 8 to 9 mutual funds, it's not going anywhere in India. So can retail investors be conscious about sustainability? Can you bring that? Secondly, the implications of if you can quantify your result, that will give a better idea that the intensity of influence of experts in the social media. So one is that whether they're right or wrong, many times they are also jailed also by security regulators. So what will be the implications? What are the biases? You have identified so many biases. Maybe you can, from your findings, you may find out which is the critical bias need to be moderated. And maybe it will give the direction of the policy regulators, okay, how they can control the social media experts, which are not the right people. They are not SEBI registered advisors, actually, to provide recommendations to the investors. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Pallavi ma'am, in case you want to have some query or you want to put forward something.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It was a very interesting study, and I noticed that you found several biases in your interviews. So perhaps my question is related to the previous one. Which one would you say is the most typical bias, and what sort of implication would that have?
I found around 14 biases, but the most important bias I found, which most of the investors is the anchoring bias. Anchoring bias. Once the expert recommended some stock, they just want to think about that stock only and take the information about that stock only. So this is the anchoring bias, and I want the regulators take some decision or make some policies to control the expert recommendations, and especially the fin influencer, which is very easily available and very difficult for the new or novice investor to take their decision. They just blindly follow their advice and jump into the stock market. This is the biggest challenge.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pallavi. Apart from that, Nisha, there is small observation which I have. There is, as Sir has already suggested, that you need to quantify the biases. Yes. There I have not seen any, it's based on the interview which you have collected. So there is the quantification is there, and statistical presentation is required along with the implication, because you can justify the implication based on some of the results. So there the results are not need to be, I believe, structured. This are some suggestions. So we can
Definitely, ma'am.
Okay. With these first, thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Surely I will incorporate your suggestions. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Anyone else would like to come across some question? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nisha Kaur, for the great knowledge you provided us with. Next, we have Ms. Shubhangi Singhal, Vivekananda Institute of Professional Studies, Delhi, India, and Dr. Ramanpreet Singh.
A very good afternoon to one and all present here. I am Shubhangi Singhal and I stand before you to present my study on moderating analysis of firm characteristics on the relationship of integrated reporting and firm value evidence from India. So I would like to start my presentation by highlighting that financial reporting existing before 2010 provided a myopic view to investors and companies as well, because they could only access the quantitative information from the annual reports of the companies. There was a deficiency that was felt of the non-financial information as well, like the elaboration of business model, the company's compliance with sustainability development goals. And so in order to curb this deficiency, in 2010 itself, International Integrated Reporting Council was constituted, which gave the phenomena of integrated reporting. Under this phenomena, the companies are required to combine their financial as well as non-financial data into a one solitary report. With the introduction of this reporting, IARC aimed to shift the emphasis of companies from short-term value creation to medium and long-term value creation. Due to the novelty of this approach, there is a limited research in this area in comparison to the other reportings that already exist. One such line of research is the impact of quality of integrated reporting on the value of the firms, especially in context of India. A few researchers like Barth and Lee and Yao studied their impact and found a significant and positive impact on the firm value, whereas in contrast to this, some of the other researchers like Soria and Rastogi, Robinson found opined the exact opposite of this. So this created an ambiguity in the relationship and ambiguity in the impact of integrated reporting quality on firm value. So in our study, we strive to bridge this research gap only. What amplifies the relevance of this study is the employment of characteristics of firms as moderating variables, which is relevant in order to signal the companies about the financial and fundamental upbeat. Coming to the variables that have been employed in this study, for independent variable, we have employed firm value, for dependent variable, we have employed firm value, which as per the literature review is calculated using the Tobin-Skew value, which was manually calculated from the annual reports of the company. For the independent variable, we have measured integrated reporting quality using the content analysis, referring to the content area of Pistoni scoreboard. The reports were analyzed for the 8 content elements. For the 8 content elements and 2 fundamental concepts given by IARC based on their 7 guiding principles. Each of the report was assessed for the content elements, scoring them from 0 to 5, making a maximum of 50. For moderating variables, we have employed firm size and firm age. As per the literature review, firm size has been calculated by taking the natural log of total assets, and firm age has been calculated by taking the year of their incorporation till 2022. In order to control the effect of leverage, we have employed it as the control variable. Coming to the research objectives, to sum up, through our study, we apply statistical analysis method to scrutinize the impact of integrated reporting quality on value of Indian companies over the period of time, that is from 2019 to 2022. To investigate the moderating impact of firms' characteristic on relationship of integrated reporting quality on firm value, and to get the insights, meaningful insights that could guide managers, investors, and policymakers make an informed decision. These are the hypotheses that have been formed with the help of objectives. Moving on to the data analysis. Initially, we conducted a bivariate analysis with the help of heat map metrics, as you can see on the screen. We calculated Pearson's correlation among variables and found that there is a positive correlation between firm value and integrated reporting quality score. This also rules out the possibility of multi-collinearity, but in order to verify that, we also calculated variance inflation factors. And each of the factors, as you can see, are less than 2.5, which is the standard for multi-collinearity. So this rules out the possibility of multi-collinearity in the study. Moving on for the multivariate analysis, we formed 3 models. The first model is checking the first objective, that is the impact of integrated reporting on firm value. And the other 2 models are calculating the interaction analysis using the moderating variables. First of all, initially we tested the we need to select between 3 methods, that is pooled OLS, fixed effects method, and random effects method of the panel data regression. Initially, we conducted the PF test, which gave the superiority to fixed effects test, fixed effect model over pooled OLS. That is also we need to test the cross-sectional relevance of the data. Then we employed the Hausman test to rule out one of the methods between random effects method and fixed effects method. That also gave the superiority to fixed effects method. So we conducted a one-way fixed effects model, but this also gave us the results that there is a positive and significant impact, and the moderating variables are also significant. But as per the principles of the statistics, we need to check the observations are different across individual specific and time specific as well. So we employed the Lagrange multiplier test for balanced panel data, which concluded that all 3 models are significant for individual and time effects. As you can see here, that this table itself gives the conclusion that all of the 3 models are significant and positive. Then again, when it comes to balanced panel data, we need to check for the serial autocorrelation, serial correlation or autocorrelation, and heteroscedasticity. For serial correlation, we employed Durbin-Watson test, as the results are given at the end, and all of the values are coming up above 2 or near to, which clarifies that there is no serial correlation in the data. And for the heteroscedasticity, we 7 minutes up. And for the heteroscedasticity, we employed Brosh-Pagan test. Model 2 was tested positive for heteroscedasticity, so we made the robust standard errors for model 2 and performed the fixed effects method again. It was concluded that there is a positive and significant impact of integrated reporting quality on firm value of Indian listed companies. The moderating analysis of firm's characteristic on the relationship of both integrated reporting quality and firm characteristic was also positive and significant. This signifies that firm's ability and its stability can affirmatively enhance firm value, thereby increasing its market growth, as increased firm value is a sign of market growth itself, as per the literature review. As for the insights for managers, investors, and policymakers, it provides motivation for managers to produce high-quality integrated reports, as it positively influences their firm value, which could result in the movement of company into a more profitable direction. The paper also offers significant insights for investors who have an incentive to invest in companies performing integrated reporting. And at last, the paper provides insights for policymakers because there is positive relation between the both. It gives an incentive for the policymakers to make it mandatory instead of voluntary. Thank you.
Can you tell us what are the 8 content elements?
Yes, ma'am. Organizational overview and external environment, business model, outlook, governance, performance, basis of presentation, risk and opportunities, and strategy and resource allocation are the 8 elements. And apart from that, there are 2 fundamental concepts as well, that is capital and value creation process. Under capital, there are approximately 6 types of capitals that the companies have to report in their integrated report.
Can it be concluded from your findings that integrated reporting is a commentary on or give insights into the quality of sustainable processes within the government?
Definitely, ma'am, because the companies are also bound to report their compliance with the sustainability development goals. And the goals in itself explain their compliance with the environmental and social governance factors. So that can be said with the conviction.
So when you say value creation process, what does value creation process mean?
Ma'am, value creation means if the company's perspective is only for the short term, or they are aiming for the medium term or the long term. So through this integrated reporting, they are bound to report such things which are for the longer term and for the medium term in how they are going to create value and how they are going to contribute to the investors and to the companies, other companies from a long-term perspective.
The value creation has to be in alignment with the
Yes, definitely.
sustainable process.
Definitely.
So, what does the integrated reporting framework say about a company's focus on sustainability, and therefore, what does sustainability do to companies?
All right, ma'am, I would definitely incorporate that. It it is more from the perspective of their financial and non-financial information. I would incorporate the major, yeah. Yes, yes. Thank you, ma'am.
Definitely, it's an interesting piece of work, particularly when we are discussing a lot about disclosure, okay, for the benefit of investors and financiers. A couple of questions from my side. So many times, companies that cherry pick actually the data points, the information they would like to provide, okay, unless it is audited by somebody. For example, BRSR came recently in the recent year. I'm not sure which year data you have taken.
Yes.
Because mostly large companies that cherry pick the data points and they disclose the information.
Yes.
So how can you difference between, how can we see that the quality of data is good enough? That one. Second is that the companies which are not reporting well, okay, they don't have anything good to show in the integrated reporting. They don't choose actually.
Yes.
Okay, so how can you address that particular issue? Those are
Yes.
2 points.
So this is the data of approximately only 80 companies, 80 listed companies. So the companies which are not good have been manually given a low score on the integrated reporting, and but it also shows that even if their score is low and they're performing integrated reporting, their firm value is still increasing if they are even providing the integrated report. Also, sir, it is different from BRSR because that is more on only focusing on the sustainability, but this is focusing on a lot of things, that is like business model, not from the perspective of sustainability. Like if a company has two segments, then are they publishing two business models for it? That also has points for integrated reporting. So, sir, when BRSR is talked about, it has focused more on the sustainability side, but the integrated reporting focuses more on every element. So that is the major difference between both of these.
Apart from that, Shubhangi, there is certain things which you talk about. You have taken two moderating variables, form size and form age. Is there any rationale for taking them as a moderating?
Ma'am, it was based upon the literature review. There are a few other variables as well, like external financing and organization.
In literature, I believe they are being used as a control variable. So why you have taken that as a moderating?
Ma'am, in some of the studies, because I wanted to show the contribution of the characteristics of the firm as to the characteristics of the size of their assets. And if the companies begin their integrated reporting as soon as possible, they would be able to increase their firm. They would be able to increase their firm value. So that is why I've taken firm age as the moderating variable and firm size. There are a few other variables like organization complexity, external financing, but I have not taken them due to the limitation of the access to data. And I will definitely try to incorporate them in my thesis and in future papers.
See, you need to justify. Your justification somewhere needs to be substantiate more.
Okay.
So, because in majority of the literature, they're used as a control variable, but you have taken as a moderating, so you need to specify that. Then for the firm performance, you have taken problems Q.
Ma'am, that is for the firm value. Firm performance, we can measure financial also, operational also, and firm value is just a part of firm performance.
Okay, the firm performance, you are talking about market performance or what exactly?
When we talk about firm performance, we can talk about the comprehensive view. That is financial also, operational performance also calculated with the help of return on assets, return on equity. And the third element is market growth, which is calculated with the help of Tobin-Skew firm value. So I've taken only that component.
You need to take into, because the justification giving for the growth, the Tobin-Skew you need to revisit.
Okay.
And the conclusion and implication you need to work with, because there is no difference between the conclusion and implication which you talk about. You are merged together. So these are the small suggestions.
Thank you
In case
so much.
anyone would like to give any suggestion or would have any query. Yeah, Dr. Pallavi also, in case, ma'am, you want to put forward something.
Hi, Shubhangi. Good work. You had a good, robust empirical analysis, so that was good. I just want to understand, what is your sample? How many companies, how many years did you look at? And because you wanted to analyze or understand if there was any impact of time, my second question is if you used time dummies for that in your regression model.
Okay, a very thankful for your insights, ma'am. To answer your first question, I've taken taken the data from 2019 to 2022, because it was in 2018 only that the Indian government introduced integrated reporting in India on voluntary basis. So I've taken the data from 2019 because most of the companies started making their integrated reports from the next year, that is 2019. And I've taken the data of about 80 companies, and those are the only companies approximately which are performing integrated reporting. And no, ma'am, I have not taken any time dummies.
Perhaps it might be a good idea to include it in a regression and see if any of the time dummies are significant, because especially the year 2020, 2021 would have been significant because of the COVID crisis. They would have had an impact on Tobin-Skew. They would have had an impact on ROA. I don't know if you plan to include that at a later stage, return on equity or net profit margin, because those ratios will help understand the financial performance of the company, and whether that had any impact during those years, again, could be something you would want to at least make a comment on.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I would definitely try to incorporate that into my study.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shubhangi Singhal. Next, we have Ms. Supriya, All India Jet Heroes Memorial College, Rohtak, India, and Dr. Rupali Mishra, Amity College of Commerce and Finance, Noida, India.
A very good afternoon, everyone. I am Supriya, here to present my paper, ESG Investments, a Sustainable Option, a study of intention and behavior of Indian retail investors. I am teaching in this college as an assistant professor, and I'm currently a research scholar under Dr. Punita Goyal here in ICACCF. So the adoption of ESG investing, which is investing based on environmental, social, and governance factors, has increased globally in recent years, and India is no exception to this trend. According to an analysis by Forbes India, the size of assets under management under ESG funds stood at 10,635 crores in 2023, which is up from just 2,703 crores in 2019. The significant expansion of ESG investments may be attributed to a variety of factors, such as increased consciousness of worldwide sustainability difficulties, intensified regulatory examinations, and the acknowledgement that ESG aspects might have substantial influence on financial performance. So, Indian investors have been found to incorporate ESG into their investing strategies across many asset classes. So this growing prominence of ESG investing, it motivated us to do a more comprehensive examination of the behavior and decision-making mechanism employed by ESG investors. But despite the significance of this perspective, limited research has been previously done on the intention and behavior of ESG investors, primarily because it is a new theme as well. And if research has been done, it has mainly focused on the individual attributes and the expectations of financial rewards on the intention to engage in ESG. This paper, our paper basically uniquely integrates several antecedents into a comprehensive framework focusing on investment intention and behavior towards ESG investing. These antecedents we identified on the basis of an extensive literature review, and then by making the theory of planned behavior as a base for the research framework, we developed the framework, which I will just show. So the paper basically makes three important contributions to the to this field. Number one, it investigates correlation among 6 factors or antecedents, which are investment attitudes towards ESG factors, social norms, financial self-efficacy, ESG concerns, risk perception, and return expectations. The effect of these antecedents have been studied on ESG investment intention and thereafter on ESG investment behavior within the Indian context. In our framework, we are taking 2 new antecedents which have been less studied in the previous studies. One is social norms and second are the ESG concerns. Other than this, our study investigates the mediating effects of the financial ecosystem and informativeness. Informativeness basically pertains to the level of accessibility to the necessary information or knowledge for the purpose of engaging in ESG investments. The level of informativeness plays a crucial role in shaping the judgments made by investors. Given that ESG investing is at a nascent stage in India, the examination of this particular factor is very significant. We have chosen financial ecosystem because in order to achieve success in ESG investing, the establishment of an ESG conscious financial ecosystem in any country is of paramount importance. The previous lack of attention from researchers, particularly in developing nations, on this variable has made us incorporate this element into our investigation. So these are the basic 2 research questions which we have tried to incorporate in our research. Number one, what is the impact of various antecedents of ESG investing on ESG investment intention and behavior? And secondly, how do informativeness and financial ecosystem mediate the relationship between ESG investment intention and ESG investment behavior? These are the hypotheses that we have framed. This is the research framework. So the first 6 are the antecedents. Their impact or relationship with ESG investment intention has been studied, and then the mediating role of informativeness and financial ecosystem between investment intention and investment behavior have been set. We collected the data through a Google form link, which was disseminated over various social media platforms. Convenient sampling approach was used. The sample size, which is 390 participants, was determined using the formula proposed by William Gordon. And the data collection period spanned from July 2022 to June 2023. These are basically the constructs we have used, the questions that we have included, along with their sources. We analyzed the data using partial least square structural equation modeling. This method was deemed suitable to study the intricate relationships of cause and effect among the chosen variables. The analysis was done using smart PLS software. So these are the demographic characteristics. The reliability and validity of the questionnaire was well checked according to the established norms. And the results that came out to be were that all 5 factors other than the social norms were found to have a significant relationship, a significant impact on the ESG investment intention. It is just the social norms which were found to have insignificant relationship with ESG investment intention. This basically implies that individuals who invest in ESG do not consistently conform to the behavior of their peers. Individuals may encounter varying levels of apprehension from those around them when considering the concept of ESG investing, but they still persist in it. Other than this, with regard to mediation analysis, the financial ecosystem has been found to have a partial mediating influence between investment intention and behavior, which basically suggests that investors would be more inclined towards ESG if a country's financial ecosystem is more ESG conscious. This would mean that the financial advisors should give more ESG guidance. Other than this, the ESG indices in our country should be more comprehensive, and there should be a greater number of efficient ESG focused mutual funds in our country. In contrast, informativeness was not found to have any mediating influence between ESG investment intention and behavior, which basically suggests that investors in India find that they don't have any problem in accessing the information required for ESG investing. In nutshell, the investors possess information regarding ESG investing, but they encounter challenges with regards to the conducive financial ecosystem. The application of PLS Predict was also applied, which basically implies a robust predictive relevance of our model in predicting ESG investment intention and ESG investment behavior. So the implications of this study are that number one, it will provide a comprehensive understanding to other ESG investors that how intentions and behaviors are formed. The same understanding would be provided to the mutual fund managers also, who can design more innovative ESG mutual fund schemes. And other than this, it also serves as a prompt for financial advisors to offer a greater range of services centered around ESG. It offers valuable insights to rating agencies, enabling them to deliver comprehensive and standardized ESG ratings to the stakeholders. And stock exchanges are given the suggestion to enhance the conceptualization of ESG indices. In general, there should be more ESG conducive financial ecosystem in our country to further encourage this form of sustainable investing. Thank you.
I think it's a very comprehensive and well done study. I also think that it's a also, kind of links to what she was doing, because, you said financial advisors should offer a more comprehensive range. And that's exactly what has come out.
Since we are looking at ESG, individual retail behaviors, and we are also looking at the financial ecosystem and what is the impact on retail investors, your findings is that there is no impact. So it means that, for example, we keep on focusing on so much of investor education. For example, mutual funds, mutual fund awareness, which is a massive impact on retail investors to buy mutual funds. So it implies something. It implies that, okay, there is not enough information or awareness created by the financial ecosystem. That's a good finding I can see from your study. But on the other hand, we also need to see that what kind of information retail investors need, because it's a big challenge. So you cannot expect retail investors to go through the annual report or the RSR and take decisions. So on the basis of social, environmental. Okay, so even, for example, ESG rating is there. It's a big question whether the ratings are right or wrong. Okay, so if you see those concepts, that also be useful. On the implication aspect, maybe you can suggest that maybe another big area of resource for you. What should be the right, I would say, mechanism to spread awareness about ESG by the financial intermediaries, including the regulators, the mutual fund association or the banking association, which will help retail investors to differentiate between a good ESG product and bad ESG product or something like that. That will have a massive practical implications. Identify it correctly, but you need to take one more step.
Sure.
I request Dr. Pallavi.
Dr. Pallavi Kishore, in case you want to put forward some suggestions.
Thank you for your presentation, Supriya. I wanted to know if you calculated the Cronbach alpha for your qualitative data, because it's a good measure for understanding consistency and reliability.
Yes, ma'am, I did. I did calculate the Cronbach alpha. I did calculate average variance extracted. I also checked discriminant validity using Cornell-Larkin criteria and cross loadings. I did all of that, but I did not include that in my presentation. Yes, I have done all of that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Supriya. And besides this, I would like to have small suggestions. That for naming, we have come up with naming the construct, and in each construct, I believe there are certain items in terms of fishes. So there is a small table which need to have, which you need to incorporate. And besides this, the conclusion, I hope you have not mentioned. Yeah, I did not mention. I just mentioned the findings verbally. I did not include the slide. Yeah. So there are certain things which, in case you mention in your presentation, would have their own weightage. And secondly, apart from the implications are concerned, so I believe from the different perspective, as our experts have already suggested, so please keep in line with that and involve. Thank you. Thank you. Any other from the audience side? Any question? Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Supriya, for your presentation. Now we'll have Ms. Komal C. Gade, MITS Bhojpal Academy of Science and Commerce, Nasik, India, and Dr. Ganesh Teltambade, MGV Institute of Management and Research, Nasik, India.
Good afternoon to one and all present here. Myself, Komal Gade. I'm from MIT's Institute, MIT's Bhojpal Academy of Science and Commerce, Nasik. I'll share my PPT just a moment. Is my screen visible to everyone? Hello?
Komal, I can't view your screen.
Your screen is not visible, Komal.
Okay, sure, ma'am. I'll check it out.
Can share and share again.
Yeah, sure, ma'am.
We'll be sharing a presentation from over here.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Ms. Komal, you can continue now.
Yes, I'll continue. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. The topic for my research paper is a study on impact and feasibility of digital currency on financial market in India. Blockchain technologies, digital currency, cryptocurrency, these have advanced, and digital money has been taken as the most reserved currency currently. Cryptocurrency is a sort of decentralized digital money that we use. It uses cryptographic methods for authentication, and in online transaction, it has a data encryption as well. My particular paper studies the effect and viability of digital money in India. Sorry. The objective of my study is to examine the effect of digital currency on the economy from point of view of money supply. I'll consider the money supply factor into consideration. I'll take that into consideration. Firstly, digital currency has the potential to bring out the changes, the very positive changes in the financial market in India. Its successful implementation requires consideration of technology, regulatory factors, social factors as well. Very collaborative efforts have been taken by government, various financial institutions to ensure the smooth transition of digital currency system in India. The methodology which I have used in my research paper is firstly a theory of money demand by Karl-Heinrich Marx is used to develop a mathematical model so that we can study the influence that people's desire to acquire the digital currency. The effect of Bitcoin and other electronic currency on India's monetary aggregate is examined using time series model. And next, using digital currency as a commodity, a local equilibrium analytical framework of tariff impact in small closed economy nation is being developed. Firstly, speaking about Karl-Heinrich Marx rule of money circulation, the Karl-Heinrich Marx rule of money circulation states that MV is equal to PT, where M stands for demand for money and V is currency turnover rate. Demand for money and currency turnover rate is equal to total quantity price level, total commodity price level, and total quantity of products and services in the market. For this commodity market, financial market, banks, general public are all taken into consideration. The money invested in financial market reserves by banks for normal withdrawal and set aside by the people. These are all the examples of the funds that are relatively static. We have supposed that these are all relatively static for a particular period of time, and hence we have developed a formula for monetary demand where M is equal to PT upon V plus C1, C2, C3 and V. MPVT again stands same for as stated above. C1 is the money market precipitation. C2 is bank reserves, and C3 is the personal funds which we have set aside for the use in time of crisis. The impact of digital money on currency turnover rate. Firstly, we'll consider the impact of money on digital currency turnover rate. The intervention of electronic payment mechanisms like PayPal, banks have given their cards, we can just simply swipe our cards with whenever we move. So the movement of money has been sped up. People easily leave the house without carrying cash because they know they have smart wallets with them, they have online shopping with them. So electronic currency is replacing the conventional currency, and so there is less need for the physical currency. Next, we study the impact of digital money on bank reserves and personal funds. Electronic transactions are more secure than cash transactions because of increased encryption. We benefit, it is faster. We are benefiting that it is faster and safer to use digital currency. Next, demand for money will drop as both the public emergency fund and the amount set aside for such crises will fall. Next, we study the impact of digital money on impact of digital money. The digital currency has implication for both global financial system as well as for the users. The accumulation of money in financial sector decrease and the growth of electronic money speed up in circulation of the cash. Lastly, we study the impact of digital money on total quantity of goods and services. The usage of virtual currency is not only limited to virtual environment, but they may be applied on social media as well. They may be used. They may be beneficial for the growth of quantity of goods and services as well.
Seven minutes up.
In order to further explore the effect of digital,
Your slides are not in tune with which you are, talking about.
actually, sorry, ma'am. The points which I just told now was related to the Karl-Heinrich Marx model, which was in the slide above. Could you please take it back? Yeah, whatever I discussed now, the impact of digital money on total quantity of goods and services, that is T, on market demand, precipitation, that all it was included on this particular formula.
Please go on.
Could you take to the next slide, please? Okay. In order to further explore the effect of electronic currency and quantity of currencies, we have carried out an empirical examination of the impact of various currency levels using data on trading volume.
I'm sorry. You left with 1 minute only. Please converse.
Okay. Could you please take to the last slide of findings, please? I would like to conclude that Karl-Heinrich model and Milton Friedman's theory on money demand concluded that the introduction of electronic money would have a negative impact on money demand. Bank reserves are the primary reason due to which cryptocurrency prices affect a drop in money demand. Empirical analysis found that digital money currency in India has no short-term effect on market money supply, but have long-term substitution effect on current deposits. Regional equilibrium model helped to analyze the welfare gap between government and their citizens. Game theory is being applied to the point on whether or not small countries would lift their restriction on digital currency. We found that when both the sides reach the balance point, we cannot optimize the overall.
Please wind up.
That we cannot optimize the overall welfare level. Thank you.
I hope you're done with.
Yes, I have done. I'm done. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes. So, Komal, I think your study is more related to the impact of digital currency on money demand.
Yes, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Right?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So, I have no observations.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, so even what ma'am said that okay, it's related to sustainability and didn't find anything. Maybe I'm not qualified actually to give an observation on digital currency, the impact of digital currency on money demand. So I'll be excused myself.
Yes.
Dr. Kishore, in case you would like to have
Yeah, just a quick question. I just want to understand digital currency. What exactly does it mean? How did you measure it? Is it availability of digital currency or circulation or investment? What exactly about digital currency have you included in your research, and how do you justify that?
Digital currency, exactly, it is a form that exists in electronic format only, right? So in this particular paper, I am trying to study about what impact it has. The acceptance of Bitcoin, the acceptance of cryptocurrency, it wasn't accepted earlier. It wasn't trade. It wasn't we weren't allowed to trade in it in earlier. So in from 2015, it has a huge transition that people have started trading in Bitcoins. People from 2015 till 2016, there is rapid increase in the number of transactions that are happening in India on third-party payment platforms. So my particular paper studies that what exactly impact it has on in India on people from users' point of view, from the customer's point of view.
So are you looking at the trading volume, or are you just looking at as a dummy variable, whether it's accepted in India or it's not?
As a dummy variable. I'm studying it out as a dummy variable, whether it will be accepted or not. And for that, I have developed a model as well, that adoption of digital currency and its impact on local monopoly, local market. Model has been developed where we have studied about the supply and the demand part.
But you're only considering India, or are you considering any other country?
I'm considering India. I'm considering India, ma'am.
But in that case, wouldn't all the dummy variables, the values be the same because for all the companies, or for... I'm just trying to understand your sample at a more granular level. So do you have a time series, or are you...
I have developed a time series model, and I have subjected that to an EDF test. And on basis of that, a model has been developed on adoption of digital currency.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Any other observation from audience point of view? Komal, I have a very quick suggestion.
Yes.
Your data is concerned, Dr. Kishore has already put forward to that. And
yes,
when you talk about the time series, the validity tests are required always for the time series. Means some diagnostic tests are required. And which model you have gone with the VAR and all, I believe ADF and so on, because stationarity, your which you have not incorporated anywhere, I believe so far. We have not seen in the analysis. Quickly forward to the findings, and even in the findings it is not converging the same thing. So our suggestion is to be little bit comprehensive. So while you're presenting, because your work is completely time series in case, as you said, so
right.
It's the basic, I believe, requirement to have substantially supported with the statistical aspect.
Sure, ma'am. I would implement it. I will show you. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Komal. Now we'll be having Ms. Kajal Pawar, Amity College of Commerce and Finance, Noida, India. Good afternoon. The topic of my presentation is predicting the symmetric and asymmetric volatility of metal market, evidence from the Russia, Ukraine, and Israel-Philippine war. As the metal industry continued to be the upfront for the sustainability movement, as it is a highly pollutive intensive industry, the objective of the study is to measure the volatility of several metal market indices and analyze the asymmetric and asymmetric volatility of these metal indices. We have assessed the volatility of two major metals, aluminium and copper. For this, we have applied the standard gauge and exponential gauge. The time period considered are from 24th February 2022 to 20 November 2023. The countries are considered are USA and India. The methodology is Arch and Gauge. The tool is Archery and the source of investing.com. Talking about the results, descriptive analysis, the standard deviation, it can be seen that aluminium USA is the highest volatility, whereas copper India is the least volatile. Further, talking about the skewness of aluminium India and copper are negative and positive for both aluminium copper in USA. As regard with kurtosis, which measure the risk, all the returns of the series are platycrutic except copper USA having the lepocrutics. On this note, it can be said that no series is normally distributed, and the same has been proven through Jagwera test, in which p-value is less than 0.5. To capture the volatility in any time series, stationarity as a precondition, which is checked by ADF test and found to be stationarity. The figure 1 presents the trend in the commodity, and figure 2 presents the volatility clustering, since the low changes are followed by low changes and higher changes are followed by higher changes. As there is a precondition to apply the symmetric and asymmetric model, the series must be stationary and there should be a presence of volatility clustering and arch effect. Each series are stationary and have arch effect as shown in table 2. Presenting the data set, the p-value is less than 0.05, which confirms there is a arch effect. After meeting all the preconditions, we deployed the standard gauge and e-gauge. Analyzing the result in table 3 for gauge, the alpha and beta 1 indicate the arch and the gauge coefficient. The coefficient of arch A1 are positive and significant, which shows that new information is captured. Further, the coefficient of gauge of every series are also significant, which signifies the volatility persistence. The sum of alpha 1 and beta 1 should be less than 1. So it shows that there is a fast decay in aluminum USA as the summation of A1 and beta 1 is less compared to the rest of the series. So during the Russia-Ukraine war and Israel-Palestine war, aluminum USA and aluminum India are the most volatile among the other metal commodities. As talking about the results of regarding to E-gauge, gamma 1 indicates the leverage effect. It is found that alpha value of aluminum USA and India are positive and negative for copper in both the countries, but the gamma value of every series are positive, so there is no leverage effect. So the aluminum USA is by far the most volatile in the metal market, providing the least return as compared to other commodities. Copper India, on the other side, was the least volatile and offers significant rewards. As a result, Copper India can be identified as a viable hedge against country-specific risk. Investing in India allows investors to diversify their portfolios. Further, the empirical results of EGAR signifies that there is no leverage effect. Talking about the implications, the investors can consider the other market as there are no leverage effect and consider the other markets which have both the leverage effect and sustainability goal. For portfolio managers, they can have the balanced portfolio of metal market and taking sustainability into consideration. Thank you.
What was the objective of your study?
And to assess the volatility of the metal market
To assess the volatility for what purpose? Why do you want to assess the volatility?
As for the investors, I want to assess the volatility. Are the market view? If I want to invest in the market, are they volatile? Are they the future? If any crisis can happen, are they? Should I will invest or not in that market?
So does volatility, I mean, for an investor, does volatility need to be assessed through a,
Yes, ma'am.
formal study, or do we just see that volatility is visible?
Ma'am, we have to study ma'am, we can study from the volatility that if this crisis will happen, the same crisis will happen in future. So are they have the same results, or we can invest if something's happen in the future again of such type of crisis?
So, I am not able to really understand the objective very well.
Yeah, so actually this kind of event, I think this is some kind of event study. You have considered the event of Israel-Palestine war and the impact on the metal prices. Okay, so for the portfolio manager or the commodity trader, so whether they hedge actually.
Yes.
So I'm surprised to see that Indian volatility in Indian copper, right?
Yes, sir.
Is less than United States because it's a surprising result because we have also currency attached to that. Okay, it's much more volatile actually during a war situation, and there is always a flight of cash or flight of investment to a safe assets, which is again United States. So I can only suggest that you need to go back actually.
Okay,
so
ma'am.
there is a
So
possibility
there's a small time frame is considered, so we can consider the last time. Maybe the results can be.
Maybe it could be an aberration, okay, because you have considered only one event.
Yes, sir.
Maybe if you consider more events, you may find a better answer.
Thank you, sir.
That's only the
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Kishore, I request you.
I would just like to know that you said that your objective was to understand the volatility of the commodities market. And why have you selected only two commodities then? Does that justify the impact on the entire commodities
This
market?
was the limitation of the study that I have considered only two main metals, the aluminium and the copper, for both the countries.
Okay, and do these represent majority of the commodities market, or was it just a convenient sample?
Ma'am, they are the main two non-ferrous metal, so that's why I've considered the aluminium and copper in these two countries.
I'm just thinking out loud that because you're looking at a crisis time, perhaps inclusion of gold in the commodities market might have added some value, because gold is considered a safe investment, a safe haven, particularly during a crisis time.
Okay, ma'am, I will consider that in the next video.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any suggestion from the audience point of view? Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
The wars.
There can be a comparison study between these things. Thank you, sir. I will consider it, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Apart from that, Komal, you talk
Kajal, ma'am.
Kajal, sorry, I'm sorry. You talk about no leverage effect.
Yes, ma'am.
So what do you mean by no leverage effect?
So, ma'am, leverage effect is used to use of funds to amplify the returns. At the time of crisis, there is no leverage effect. You cannot invest in these commodity to amplify your returns. So there is no leverage effect.
I do have certain concern.
Yes, ma'am.
Because how your study is useful for the investors, number one. Secondly, you talk about two metals only. What is the rationale of choosing only two metals?
And they are the two main metals considered to be in these.
On what basis you are saying they are the two main metals?
Ma'am, there are past. I have done the literature review. There are various past research also taken these two variables into consideration.
This is I do little bit would like to suggest you.
Yes,
so it is not on the basis of past literature. You are talking about this is there and that. So means a lot of literature have considered a lot of other things.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So you need to have proper justification when you're choosing out of say 10 only 2. So you should have the justification, number one. Secondly, when you talk about no leverage effect, there's no proper explanation of this, neither in the implication or in the conclusion. Secondly, your objectives, you need to rework on the objectives also. And you talk about, the arch, you talk about arch, and then you have the, talk about the two statistical tool which you have talked about.
Yes.
So there is some diagnostic test for both, right, before going with. So that's need to be, worked upon.
Okay.
So these are the two suggestions.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
So thank you, Kajal. And now I would request the session chair to give us their viewpoints on the research paper which we had right now.
Yes, so I will be very candid in sharing my views. I've already done that, I think. When it comes to Nisha's paper, I think it is a fair paper, except that you can probably just, add a very specific research question as to whether expert opinions are contributing to the cause of sustainable investing. And if, depending on your findings, you can make very valid recommendations as to what should SEBI's mandate be for expert recommendations. On the paper by Shubhangi on integrated reporting. So I think again a fair piece of work does bring in some dimension or how firm that good work, but I think if you could at least put it oriented more towards whether it's sustainable to invest or that do better. I already commented on good and comprehensive. On the digital currency, frankly, I think, at least to my limited understanding, I think digital currency and cryptocurrency are not the same thing. We're talking about both of them, but that's using a digital. And on the, on using aluminum and copper price volatility, especially in the very limited situation of the Israel-Palestine ongoing war, is probably not justification of what investors should be doing when investing in these commodities. Just one more line. I'm sorry. One more line. I do appreciate, the work everyone is doing, and in research, I guess it's always like this. You do your work, you come to conferences, you get feedback, you do your work, and it's an ongoing cycle. So I want to encourage all of you for the work you're doing. Congratulations, and keep doing it.
I can see a couple of new research ideas actually coming from students. Even I am not a academician like Madam, who is a researcher. So on the first research piece, again, I mean, we need to see, since I'm a practitioner, I mean, what is the practical implications? So unless your research piece has a practical implications, and if you don't put that in the research papers, even if you are presenting, so it will not become relevant. I mean, definitely you are contributing academically, but you need to do that. Particularly this the social media experts nowadays, many of them under scrutiny by the Securities and Exchange Board of India, and you can also suggest that how securities regulator can play a role, basically control this kind of, I will say that raw influencer, so changing as well as distorting the market. So that's another aspect I would like to see in your research area. Second is regarding integrated reporting. It's a massive subject actually, integrated reporting. So I'll go back to again the quality of data, actually whether integrated reporting captures all the quality of data, so all the material information. So there is a lot of noise in the integrated reporting data because companies tend to filter those information data points and always try to give rosy pictures. Remember that those data points are not audited. So these are voluntary reports, maybe submitted to companies like CDP or so. These are voluntary reports. It's not audited. So there is a possibility of error also. So how can you see, how can you differentiate between noise and the quality of information, which is critical. The number three, an ESG investment on Indian retail investors. And so far, actually, Indian retail investors are not fond of ESG investment, very frankly. For example, if you see ESG mutual fund, so 2 years back, the total number of ESG mutual fund was 10. So in fact, in the last 6 months, people are withdrawing money from ESG mutual fund and they didn't. And ESG mutual fund perform very poorly. So one of the reasons people say that since they invested in IT stocks and banking stocks, and they didn't invest in oil and gas, so they perform very, very poorly. So maybe you can suggest an idea that how retail investors can incorporate ESG aspect and select company based on the right information. It's a very, very early area, early, I will say, area of study. For example, even if there is a lot of question mark on ESG rating also by the academicians. So maybe you can help the regulators actually how retail investors can be integrated, can differentiate between good ESG company and bad ESG company. On cryptocurrency or digital currency, I'm not qualified enough to give an opinion. I'm not the right person, I will say. Then systemic and asymmetric volatility, I think the sample size is very small. Okay, by considering only one war, you cannot get the result. So you need to expand the sample size. At the event study, people also use the minimum sample size, I think, is more than 10. I don't remember exactly, so the sample size is very, very small. And there are questions also why do commodities. So there is no valid reason. Maybe you will say that, okay, the value of the commodities may be 90% of the total value of the traded commodities or the volume of the traded commodities. And the second question is that why only two countries, United States and China? Because the biggest importer or user of commodities are China. Okay, but we are not considering China in our sample, only United States and India. And other manufacturing countries which are basically needing commodities for their manufacturing. So why we're not including them? Maybe when you revise the revision paper, you may like to answer. Not sure, but interesting area. So thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I request Dr. Kishore in case you would like to put forward something.
Yes, thank you. I think my fellow chairs have given very good feedback for each of the participants. So I'm not going to go one by one, but I'll just give some overall feedback. I really enjoyed going through all your research presentations. It was really nice to see different aspects of finance, different aspects of sustainability all come together. I do have myself a lot of new ideas now after listening to all of your presentations on how else we can connect these various connected but not so directly connected areas of work. I also would like to encourage you to continue this journey. I know there's been a lot of suggestions, there've been a lot of feedback, but your work has been really good. And doing research is not a straight path. It is like trying to fold a fitted sheet. It is challenging, it can get confusing, but in the end, when you get it, it is very satisfying. So continue your research and all the best.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for all the prospective views and so much research-oriented aspect which you have discussed, given thoughtful suggestions to our presenters also. I'm really thankful to all our session chairs for their really inspiring words and very meaningful suggestions too. Thank you.
Thank you so much, session chair members. And now I would request you to announce the best research paper.
We are just working on. In the meantime, you please carry forward.
Sure, ma'am. Now I would like to request Seema ma'am to please give the memento to the session chair members and Dr. Punita Goel and Bhavna good ma'am. Rishi sir, Pallavi ma'am. Neha ma'am.
Now I request Dr. Bhavna also, Dr. Pallavi also to join, Dr. Rishi also. Yeah, thank you. It's happening with you. Okay. Dr. Bhavna, Dr. Pallavi, Dr. Rishi, kindly join. Dr. Rishi, Now afterwards, we'll go with the
Certificates of the
participation
participation.
certificate to the students,
Yes.
as well as announce the best paper awards afterwards.
I would request the session chairs to please give the participation certificate. First is Shumbhagi Singhal. Dr. Ramanpreet Singh. Miss Supriya.
Request Dr. Atul and
Ms.
Dr.
Rupali
Rajesh also
Mishra.
to join us, please. In the fancy music.
Miss Kajal Pawar. Dr. Neha Puri. Miss Nisha Goel.
Votes for the best paper award. Both of you, all the best. Well, I would appreciate all the presenters have well presented the paper, and it's very difficult task for the selection or for the section chairs and co-section chair and along with me to select the best paper for that. So, but see, we have to select 1 out of 5. So, very difficult task. I just congratulate all the participants. Very inspiring. And some of the sections to the best of our extent we have already provided. So, the best paper goes to Miss Supriya that and Rupali, Dr. Punita, is sustainable option. So after we really congratulate you for this, and the awards and the certification for this will be given at the time of the validity session. So that's all for our point of view, and that's very nice. And congratulate to Dr. Punita and Dr. Rupali also for the wonderful work she has gone with, and really congratulate you. Thank you so much. And well, I will request to Dr. Neha to kindly wind up the session.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Good afternoon, everyone. It is indeed an honor and privilege to extend my heartfelt gratitude on behalf of Amity College of Commerce and Finance. As we come to the close of this enriching technical session 1 on sustainable finance, first and foremost, I would like to express our sincere thanks to esteemed author who presented their insightful research, shedding lights on intricate nuances of sustainable finance. We are honored to have Dr. Lavanya, Dr. Niti Anand, Dr. Pallavi Kishore, for their role of session chair and for contributing their valuable insights to the session. A special note of appreciation is reserved for Dr. Sujata Khandai, our HOI, our faculty coordinator, Dr. Seema Gupta, and student volunteers, whose unwavering support and guidance have been instrumental in the success of technical session. Last but not least, our gratitude extended to all the participants who attended the session, both physically and virtually. Your active participation and engagement contributed to the vibrant exchange of ideas, making the session a truly enriching experience for everyone involved. As we concluding this technical session 1, we look forward to the continued participation in forthcoming sessions as well. Thank you once again for making this event resounding success. Have a wonderful day ahead. Thank you so much.